Ladies and gentlemen, gamers, welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be all about the new update, Steel Shepherd, in the expansion pack that is releasing in just 5 days. That is December 5th. And I couldn't be more excited. This update is absolutely massive. I'm recording this introduction after having watched the 3 hours and having commentated on it. All the content you're about to see over the next few hours is just awesome. I mean, I couldn't be more happy for the direction that Relic has taken the game. After a really, really rough start, these past 6, 7, 8 months have been tough, and the community has been upset. The community has requested some very specific changes, and Relic has delivered on nearly all of them. Everything from the art redesign to the gameplay enhancements to the new minimap and tac map, the overall performance, UI changes. You just go down the list. There are so many improvements to the game. Every file has been reworked according to Relic, and that's just a tremendous amount of effort by them. So, guys, I think this is the road to redemption, the truest form that the game needs to take on. It is really helping to make this the epitome of the franchise, right? Turning Co3 into what should be the best version of Company of Heroes, period. So I just want to state that going into this, very excited. And without further ado, let's jump into the video.
Hey everyone, and welcome to our Company of Heroes deep dive live stream for our Steel Shepherd update 1.4. We're very excited to have you here, and today we're going to be going in depth on several key areas of improvement in our Steel Shepherd update, along with the content in Hammer and Shield, which are both releasing on December 5th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So for today's show, we've actually pre-recorded several interviews and demonstrations with Relic developers because I just can't fit that many people in here at the same time. So we have interviews covering our new art improvements, our new maps, the 2 new battle groups, the overhaul to the dynamic campaign map, and of course, our replay feature. Don't forget, we have a live stream on December 5th, the day of Steel Shepherd's release, where we're going to be talking to our balance team to go over the patch notes and changes coming in this update as well, so you can follow along with the patch notes. Of course, if you want to stay up to date on everything Company of Heroes and all of the other teases and reveals for Steel Shepherd, you're going to want to follow us on your social channel of choice, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube at Company of Heroes. You can find our forums at community.companyofheroes.com. That's also where we're going to post the patch notes. And for everything else, you can go to companyofheroes.com. Join our Discord server at discord.gg/companyofheroes. And of course, follow our new Twitch channel, twitch.tv/companyofheroes. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, and now I'm joined by Brent from the art team. Brent, I think this is the first time some folks are seeing you on camera, so can you introduce yourself and tell us what do you do on Company of Heroes?
Yes, hello. My name is Brent Breedveld, and I'm the art director for Company of Heroes 3 Live.
Amazing. Well, it's great to have you here. I know there's been a ton of work that has gone into Steel Shepherd from the art side. So can you maybe talk about sort of, or before we even get into Steel Shepherd, let's maybe talk about you. I want to learn more about you. So can you tell us a bit about your history with Relic? Because I know you've been here for a bit and you've worked on a bunch of other games. So you can tell us about, a little bit about that?
Yeah, I've been at Relic for about 14 years and really enjoyed my time here. I started as animation director for Space Marine way back in the day, and moved over to Company of Heroes 3 kind of towards the end of that project, and was a part of all the expansions for Company of Heroes 2, I should say.
Right.
And then was part of all of those expansions for Company of Heroes 2 as animation director. And I was also animation director for Age of Empires 4. So that project from start until live. So lots of fun experience working through all of those challenges, making great games. But yeah, I love being here and working on this type of product. So
yeah, and we're excited to have you on Co3 now. So let's maybe get into, again, the work that your team has been doing for Co3 and specifically for Steel Shepherd, our 1.4 update. What were some of your team's like big picture goals with this update?
Yeah, we wanted to take a step back and kind of evaluate where we were at. We recognized that some of the feedback from the community, and just kind of like looking at it ourselves on like where it was at. It wasn't quite where we wanted it to be in some areas, and so it was really important to kind of take a breath, acknowledge that, and then just see evaluate what we could actually do to make some improvements and some adjustments.
Mhm.
So that was kind of the first step that we took, and then we kind of made some decisions from there.
Okay. So before we kind of get into some of those changes, I'm kind of curious about your history with the franchise. Obviously, you did a bunch of work on Co 2, but specifically, when we're talking about things like art, there's a lot of like visual identity with the Company of Heroes franchise. I'm kind of curious, like, what does the franchise just sort of mean to you, like personally?
Yeah, I mean, if I think back, just personally, even just being young and growing up with grandparents that had firsthand experience of being in the Netherlands during when the bombing of Rotterdam occurred, and just hearing stories from them. So I've always been kind of close to these personal stories and experiences that people have had, and I'm fascinated by that. I always have been.
Hmm.
And I had a great grade 12 history teacher as well that like took us through World War II history. So I've just kind of always been fascinated by that. And the Company of Heroes franchise has always done such a great job bringing that authenticity forward with kind of the right tone and reverence for those whose lives have been impacted, because no one's lives of the time were left unchanged, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's such a strong foundation for the franchise, and I think that's why it has that appeal and that interest from that strategy experience. So
Absolutely. I
that's
agree.
meaningful to me when I started working here and just saw the care and the detail that Company of Heroes 2 team had put into that game, and being able to carry that forward into those expansions. I really enjoyed that. And so having the opportunity to come onto the live team here and kind of bring that back is kind of exciting. And so, taking a step back, that's really what, when the personal stuff kind of looks at the team stuff, and like, what can we do to bring some of that back, and how can we kind of move this forward with that in mind.
Yeah.
I like it when your passion can meet the work at the same level, right? So
Yeah, and I'm glad you kind of brought up that personal aspect, because you're right. This was what we're representing in game was this global conflict, and like no one's lives were untouched by that. I had a grandfather who was in the Polish army, spent a lot of the war in Soviet prison camps before the Germans invaded the USSR, and then kind of rejoined under the British, and fought their way through North Africa and Italy, where Co3 is set. So this project really has a personal significance for me, and like you said, I know there are tons of people on the team that have stories like that about grandparents or family members that had to live through this conflict.
yeah, when you're young, you feel like it's so far away.
Yeah.
And then you kind of get older and you kind of realize like, oh, that was actually that was pretty recent history, from around when I was born. And that's your perspectives change a little bit the older you get. And,
Yeah.
and the when you look at these photographs of World War II and you're looking at reference and you see these young faces and you think, oh boy, these guys were so young, and what they were going through and what they were willing to do. And, and that's why I love the significance of bringing that history to an experience like this, right? Like that's kind of what helps make it special. So
Awesome. So let's maybe talk
Really cool to
specifically
hear
more
that.
about Co3 here. I'm going to switch over some footage that we can talk over.
Especially coming from the art
So
director.
I'm kind of curious about what's sort of your vision or ideal when you think about the visual identity of a Company of Heroes game.
yeah, believable warfare is one of those franchise pillars that we've carried forward on every product, and I think that holds true with this experience.
I think this is the new map, new 1v1 map.
But then there's that game component to it, right? Like this is an experience that needs to be readable and it needs to feel right. And You want that strategy, you want the tactics, but then you want to be as authentic as possible with them, like with all that we were just saying, right? Like that is part of the DNA of this game. So, it's kind of like that becomes a bit of the razor on like how you look at the screen, how you look at the game as as a canvas, as like what are we presenting to the player? Are they able to connect with it in the right ways? Are they feeling the emotion? And so you kind of take a step back, and that's kind of how you try to look at it. You try not to get too hung up in the details at first. Have that high level evaluation, and then you kind of make your decisions from there.
And I know off camera you kind of spoke to me a lot about like tone and trying to improve the tone of the game. Can you maybe speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, certainly. Some of the visuals were, I think, right from the front end, as we were kind of those first images, they had maybe a bit more of a painterly look, and it makes things a little more fantastic and a little less connected to that believability pillar. And I think that was something that I know that, like, when I saw it, I was like, oh, I don't know if that's right. Like, it's a nice piece of art, but does it really hit the tone and the feel? And the more you go back through World War II photographs and World War II history, the more you kind of see that black and white, the grit of things, and I think you need to be careful about like what you don't want to take too many wild swings at things and mess with what is working. But I think getting back to that a little bit more of a gritty tone, darker tone, that represented the seriousness of the events. I think it's important. I think when looking at the screen, you're seeing like things getting destroyed, homes being destroyed. There's soldiers dying. There's things blowing up. Like that's pretty heavy. So
Yeah.
Tough to find like what the right fit is, but that's kind of some of the thinking there.
Right. So I know
100%.
we've done a
Look
lot
at
of
that.
work
It
to sort
looks
of get closer
a
to
lot
that
better.
tone that we want. One of those things is the updated menus and front end, and we've shown a little bit of that in teasers, and we'll show a little bit more later when we look at the replays system.
New tack map.
So what else did we sort of do when we approached that revamp of all of our menus?
Yeah, the front end was a great opportunity to take a look at not just the visuals, but also that UX flow. How easy was it to get into our menus and navigate through things? We definitely felt there were areas we could improve. So in addition to the visuals, we sort of reset to have a bit of a library that we could draw from. So there was a consistency, and then our UX team and our UI artists really collaborated well to help. And we were quite critical of that flow. So we took a really good pass at it, starting with the front end image, and just it has the animation, it has that great composition in the background of kind of the Gala invasion, and that soldier that's sort of in the foreground. That's like, it's a nod to like Company of Heroes 1.
Yeah.
That we always kind of liked that it represented that young soldier, the seriousness of like the lives that were at stake here, and the bravery and the heroism of those individuals that they were willing to go do what they did. So I think that I always love that from the initial, like, Company of Heroes 1. So we sort of like echoed that here. And certainly it's a darker, it's got that darker, a little bit more grit, but it also allows from an artistic standpoint, it allows the UI to pop and be a little bit more readable, and it stands out. So it should feel better in flow. I'm really excited for players to get their hands on it. It should look a little more on brand, a little bit more correct in tone, and just overall, hopefully, a more enjoyable experience. We also updated our loading screen backgrounds. So looking at all that historic reference, we sort of came up with that idea of backgrounds that were inspired by World War II photography, the guys with the cameras that were putting themselves on the line with just a camera and capturing all these images so that the world could see what was actually happening. So sort of use that as inspiration for those. So you have that kind of black and white photography of these kind of fantastic events that are happening, these explosions, things like that. So I'm hoping players really appreciate that and like that change as well.
Yeah,
Looks really
even
good,
from my
man.
own playtesting and kind of going through the menus now, it definitely feels like a more immersive experience from like when I boot up the game to getting into a match. So I think that your team has done a really great job sort of nailing that feel so far.
Yeah, I'm really proud of their work. I think they are too.
There's a big
They've done
difference
really
too
good
in like the
job.
contrast and the
And
shadowing of the
I
unit
like that
models.
it's more. It feels a
in the
little more
terrain.
cohesive. I think across all the
It's
the
very
screens.
noticeable.
I think players will feel that. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. So what about some of the in-game or in-match artwork and visuals? What can you tell me about your team's work there?
Look how good that looks.
Yeah, we did a significant amount of work on our atmospheres, our basically our lighting and rendering. We did a pass at every map. We started by taking a look at the fog. So we have this really great fog system that's very authentic, but it was difficult to control it. So we got some tech improvement that allowed us to control where the fog was in relation to the camera. And so we were able to push some of that fog away from the camera. So the starting point was to provide that default camera clarity so that you didn't have a lot of fog between the camera and the units. So right away there was a little bit more clarity there, that you got a little more contrast. And we also looked at our let's see, we looked at our AO. We did so much, so I'm trying to get it back in memory here.
Right. Yeah.
We
So
did some ambient occlusion improvements. So our ambient
big.
occlusion was a little bit blurry and loose, and so we weren't really
100%,
noticing
yeah.
it much. So we've brought that in. So things are self-shadowed a little better. They sit on top of surfaces a little better. So like a building sits on the surface better and has a little bit of that like shadowed edge between it and the ground, which really grounds things. It helps a lot. We did a tone curve tweak to help balance some of like the black levels to light levels to get that background in a better place so units could read.
I know
Am I missing
you're talking about atmosphere fog, but what I think we did some changes to the fog of war as well, right?
Oh, that's correct. We don't impact the mountains in the background as well. So now they blend better with the sky. So at lower declinations, things look a little better, and just the way objects stand out in the fog of war. There's been some good.
That's
changes there, so
ambient
that should
inclusion.
feel
It's just going to
better
make
to
everything
players.
more
Hopefully
visible
that's
and
noticeable.
Yeah.
pop out
And
more.
then in general, we just did a lighting
important.
pass. So some maps had some color that might have felt a little bit off, and just things were like getting a bit washed out and that sort of thing. So we've brought some of that color back in and some of that contrast that looks just a little more appropriate.
Okay,
to
so
what players would have experienced before.
what about some of the smaller things? Because I know, like, even looking at some of this footage, the flags now animate differently. I think the resource icons. Have
I
been
like the
updated.
resource
what kind of
icons.
like smaller gameplay affecting things might your team have looked at?
Yeah, we took a look at some of those in-game UI opportunities to just help provide clarity, and just taking some lessons from COH2 that were maybe not carried forward. If players were experiencing that and missed it, then we tried to get some of that back in. We also brought in some improvements in effects. So like some of the mortar hits, some of the directionality of muzzle flashes from tanks, etc., and bringing lights back into the muzzle flashes. So as units are shooting, they're going to be illuminated by that muzzle flash. So just some of those details come back in, and it really does add up to make everything feel a little better. Even though on its own it seems minor, but collectively it really helps the experience, I think.
Right. So was there any other sort of FX work or audio sort of small arm stuff that the team looked at that they felt would be pretty impactful?
I think it's a lot of little things like that I can't quite remember because there's a pretty big list. There was quite a bit of effort put in to just get to as much as we possibly could with this. So I can't actually remember and list them all right now.
That's totally fair.
But
this is obviously a
there's
2v2 map.
bit,
We have 4 colors
that
here.
improves the experience.
I like the map a lot.
All of these sort of lighting and fog changes and the changes to some of the effects and explosions and impacts, like, yeah, I know it's a lot of little changes, but it seems like it's pretty impactful. Like, what's sort of your hope or your goal with everything that your team has worked towards with this 1.4 update?
We just want to make a great experience for players. We don't want to disappoint people. We want to immerse people into this. We don't want them to think about things like ambient occlusion. We just want them to jump into a game and just feel that this is a great experience. It's a readable, responsive, fun game that people, that is really enjoyable, that gets your heart rate going and just immerses you, right? Like this is what our goals are. We want to make people happy, right? With our with our work. So I think this puts it in a better place than it was before the update. And I really just hope players appreciate it and enjoy it. The team worked really hard and cared, So the players
absolutely,
cared,
man,
and the
makes
team
all the
cared.
difference in the world.
It's just evident.
The immersion, the feel of the game.
Before we say goodbye, Brent, I'll maybe open it up to you. Is there anything that you want to impart to players? Any sort of final thoughts before they get their hands on the Steel Shepherd update?
Just that I really hope they enjoy it. Just kind of echoing what I just said. I think that's where it's at. I hope you appreciate the
absolutely
the update. And
we do. I really appreciate it, dude.
Awesome. Yeah. Oh, I know your team's worked really hard on this, Brent, and I'm excited for players to check it out. And I know that they're already excited by some of the stuff that they're seeing in the early footage. So thanks for taking the time to chat with us, and we hope to chat with you again soon.
No problem.
All right, so what is this? Grenades. Pretty slow animation overall. What is this? Attack ground or what?
Engineers here.
Okay. Flamethrower. Once again, pretty slow animation time. Not that responsive, kind of glitchy with the unit models.
Hold up! Stop!
Okay, now let's see after. Grenade. Watch the unit, the model. Look how quick that is. That's way quicker. Way quicker. That's awesome. That's like what, 2 seconds max? Let's see. 1, 2, yeah, that's 2 seconds. Looks like 2 seconds for the grenade and the flamethrower. That's awesome to see.
All right, and joining me now is, of course,
You got
our favorite
bacon.
map designer, Will Ward. How are you today, my friend?
I'm good, thank you.
So it's great to have you back. I feel like we were just having a chat about some maps that we were creating together in our Map Making 101 series.
Yeah, we certainly were. And we'll get to talk more about that sort of today.
Yeah, I'm excited to show off some of the new maps that are coming in Steel Shepherd. But Will, let's maybe back up a little bit, because in our roadmap that we released earlier this year, we only indicated that we would be bringing one map in our Steel Shepherd update, but it sounds like you decided to surprise us with two.
Yes. Yeah, so Steel Shepherd is a massive update. We didn't want to overcommit, especially when it came to maps, because maps require design and art input. We didn't want to put out there we could get anything more than one, just in case. But it turns out in the course of creating the 101 map making tutorial series, we had a map on our hands that needed just a little bit of polish to finish up. So yeah, that's our second map.
Amazing.
We'll be showing a bit of content on it shortly, no doubt.
Yeah. So again, if folks want to check out that entire series, it's all on our YouTube channel. So you can see Will walking us through, creating that right from a gray box all the way to the finished map that's going to be coming in Steel Shepherd. So Will, before we jump into some of the footage and take a closer look at these new maps, can you tell me about some of the work that's gone into our multiplayer maps in general for Steel Shepherd. Like what sort of general improvements can players expect? Maybe not even in these new maps, but just across our maps in the game.
So are we getting a 1v1 and a 2v2
We've talked
map?
about this before, how
so, yeah.
between updates, there's always time for bug fixing and improvements. Especially because creating a new map is quite art intensive. It gives me some time to go back over our backlog and sort through bugs and issues. So again, we continue pathfinding improvements. Every single map gets minor pathfinding improvements because we always want to ensure that gameplay is as smooth on them as possible.
Right.
So it could be anything as minor as adjusting a tank trap. It could be making cover slightly on an angle so it can hold more people. It'll always be very, very minor stuff. But we also get to do some, not necessarily major overhauls, but we get to do some overhauls like Monte Carlo, for example, has had some quite big adjustments to the central area, the compound. Where we've removed some cliffs, added a couple of sight blockers, so you have a little bit more fair gameplay around that center. We know that it was becoming a little contentious. It was quite one-sided. If you can get into that compound first, you could lock it down quite easily. Also some adjustments to Pacino Stalemate. Some of the cover along the central line has been adjusted. These aren't things that will completely change the way that the maps play. We don't want to necessarily do that. We want them to still be very familiar to you. But we'll always do these little tweaks just to improve things where we can.
Okay, and I know I'll probably end up talking to Marco a little bit more about this when we're talking about replays. But it looks like we've got new mini maps and new tech maps for everything.
We do.
This is the most exciting
so
thing.
Previously, we were using a procedural system to create mini maps. So essentially, the types of textures that you use on the maps would determine what color it appeared on the minimap. But the contrast wasn't there. Things weren't being differentiated well enough. It was difficult to tell the difference between a main road and a side path. So the decision was made by yours truly to go in and hand make them.
Okay.
So I grabbed the files from Co1 and just got digging.
Whoa, dude, that's insane.
Photoshop expert. I am very far from it. So it was a little arduous, but yes, we have new, hopefully well-received mini-maps.
Wow, massive respect to Bacon, man, for that.
And
that's
personally, I'm also really excited about the changes.
a lot
to
of
the tactical
work.
map as well. And again, we'll get into more detail.
Yeah.
And he went back
about
into
that later, but
Code
it's
1.
definitely a lot more user-friendly.
Bacon's a legend.
Just easy to navigate.
Seriously,
But I
thank you,
think,
Bacon,
Will,
for
we should
doing
probably
that
just get right
because
into it and take a look at some of these new maps.
Going
So,
back
folks
to
may
Co1 is
recognize
legendary.
This one here is day 101. So again, Will, we obviously spent a lot of time on this map as you were building it out for us in the Map Making 101 series.
So this is the 2v2 map again.
So can you tell me about
Looks
what
good.
inspired this map? Like
Definitely
maybe some
darker.
of the, I know in past interviews you kind of talked about the fact that like you read a lot of history books and even without reference photos, you would sometimes just build a map off of something that you've read. So we kind of went through this process together. So I think players have some insight on us because this was very much a, hey, let me show you how to do this. But were there any other types of inspiration that you had when you were building Day 101?
Yeah, so I mean, we'll start from the beginning. We've mentioned before that a map can either be created because of just inspiration, like you mentioned, reading books. I will come across stories and go, I'm going to build that scenario. I want to relive that event, or it could be aerial photography. I've got reams and reams of old aerial photographs of Italy and Europe, and it is fantastic inspiration. But sometimes a map will just be something that you build and go, I like the way that this plays, now I need to try and find a real-life event or real-life location to stamp on it. Because we built this map for the 101 series, we had the map, but we didn't have the historical context.
Right.
So the design of the map naturally favors what we want.
Looks a lot like a Co1 map to me.
And that's why it has a little bit of everything. It has this urban area that's on high ground. It has a central parting river. We showed off things like waterfalls. We have a really nice rural area with lots of open fields towards the mid. So it has a lot of features that you would expect to see in Italy anyway. But we wanted to try and tie together some context. And in reading...
So, like, one thing that I really love about this map design in particular is that you have not only this open field area, this river across the center, but you have the urban environment up towards the top of the map that they just showed. So what I love about that is like every part of the map is different, and there are different strategic objectives based on the terrain, different engagements across several games you'll play on the map. It's going to have higher replayability, but I just think overall it's a good balance to have one side to be an open field, the other side to be completely different. There's bridges, there's an urban environment, and you're starting to see this design, I think, through Bacon's more recent maps. Although Winterline does the same thing, Seuss Wetlands, many of the maps do that, and I think it's really good design. I like it personally. But let's jump back into the video.
I was looking for any significances of the number 101 because it was the 101 tutorial series. And it turns out on day 101, after the invasion of Salerno, so the invasion of Italy and the landings at Salerno, the Allies attempted to cross the Sangro River.
Cost cinematic.
Oh, look at that.
So good.
Yeah, so it was a nice coincidence. This was actually a very, very major river crossing across quite a significant length. I think it's like 70 kilometers or more of Italy's bisected by the Sangro. And it was a mix of American, British, Indian, and Canadian forces trying to cross this river pretty much at the same time. And it was bloody. It was an absolute nightmare of a crossing.
The resource point
And they were
icons are
all
so
looking
helpful.
for areas like this map shows, a shallow river crossing where you could get across without the assistance of boats, where the current wasn't too strong. And these areas of shallows were hotly contested because it was also built into the German defensive line. So it was perfect. It made excellent sense. So we called it Day 101 as a result. And we expect to see the sort of combat that happened there. And for those who, those of the players who have enjoyed their time on the campaign map or are thinking of revisiting the campaign map in 1.4, because that's also seeing loads of major updates, the crossing of the Sangro River is what happened right before the Battle of Ortona.
Okay.
Just for a little bit of context. So it's quite deep into the war at that point. 101 days is a long time, and by that point it was getting bloody.
Okay, so let's maybe talk about our approach to, or your approach to the design of this map. Again, we kind of covered that in the 101 series, and I feel like maybe I had a slight hand in that as I was sitting with you for a bulk of that time. But what was sort of your design intent with a map like this?
So originally we didn't intend for this to be strictly competitive
sniper.
or casual. We wanted to straddle the line just so
Course.
everyone could get
Course
something
it
out
died.
of it. And again, we wanted to show off a mix of casual
Feels
and
bad.
competitive elements, which is why we have things like bridges for the casual players, and we have wide open spaces for the competitive players. But the main thing I wanted to show was contrast. I wanted to have areas that play differently to each other.
Yeah.
So this
it's
area
so
that we're seeing
important.
now at the moment, where Miguel's sniper took a unceremonious nosedive into the water.
Look at the contrast in the
Sniper.
shadows and
This
just
is
like
where I want to
overall graphical improvements.
show how to build areas like this where you get plenty of vehicle flanking. You can build strong defensive lines. Because these areas are what we saw in a lot of, say, Co2's more competitive maps. The
Right.
likes of Red Ball Express and Moscow outskirts. These are the wide open spaces where you can slip around unnoticed or build up lines of sandbags and draw the enemy in towards you. But I also wanted to have something that was more casual oriented. So towards the north, you've got the built-up city, you've got the choke points from the bridges. You can still play aggressively in those areas, and there's a lot of opportunities to flank. There's a lot of narrow alleyways that you can slip units by without being noticed.
It's the Rangers.
So yeah, it was a nice opportunity to show a variance of gameplay, and playing it with the team in a more competitive and aggressive fashion, it plays out nicely enough. Nicely that we wanted it to get into the autumn action, not just sit forever in the workshop.
That's great to hear. I'm curious what you feel are some of the more notable features that players are going to be encountering on this map, and like what are you excited for players to discover as they play it?
Honestly, I'm intrigued to see how players handle the open space in the center, because we don't have many maps in Co3 that have that. So this wide open space, which is way wider than
Wow.
any unit.
Look at that
cyclone,
damage. They just melted at
like even
250.
with two AT guns provided sight at either corners
Oh.
of this open rural
Rangers
space,
are pretty good.
You can't see everything.
Yeah.
So I'm intrigued to see how players handle this with our more mobile and aggressive factions like the DAC. You could really slip through unnoticed on this map. It's quite wide.
It's the Italian infantry.
But also with our new battle groups that are coming out, because they are, or at least the coastal Italian coastal battle group is more defense oriented. I'm intrigued to see what kind of defensive lines players make, especially with their easy access to bunkers. Can you lock down a space like this sufficiently? And just how can you beat a space like this with?
I think you'll be able to. I'm going to go into the battle groups a little bit later in the video.
Advanced infantry for the Americans.
Right. Yeah. I think one of the things you said to me before we recorded was how players might have to create pockets of control, and I imagine like some of the more defensive-oriented players will harken back to the Co-1 days.
Yeah, very much so. It's the same with our 1v1 map that we'll be releasing and talking about shortly. You can't expect to control this entire map. It's too big. You would probably be expected to hold about 2/3, 66% of the map. So you could probably hold all of this rural space, but none of the urban area. You might be able to lay mines and lay traps, but you won't be able to actively hold it. You have to pick and choose what battles, and it leaves you open and vulnerable.
Yeah, and I guess that really contrasts with that dense urban area. How do you think that section of the map is going to play out, and like what are players going to end up doing in here?
I mean, I know what our hardcore competitive players will say because it's got too many windows. But again, like I love urban areas in our games. They look absolutely beautiful, and we're trying to encourage where we can more gameplay in these spaces because we have so many tools to deal with them now. So that's actually something that I had in discussions with the gameplay team. They're looking at improving the use of tools that are anti-garrison. So flamethrowers and grenades, for example, they want to make them easier to use and more effective against buildings.
Yeah, indirect fire as well, which is something that we'll talk with the balance team.
Absolutely. So I'm expecting lots of booby trapping in these urban spaces. The streets are narrow enough that you could easily snare vehicles. But even things like just barbed wiring off a couple of the bridges and hoping that they don't get used for the rest of the game is perfectly viable. We're also taking a look at demolition charges to try and make them more viable. I've also reduced the health on bridges so that they can be more of a viable part.
That's a really cool little feature.
Our bridges were very, very healthy. We wanted to make sure that we didn't take any risks with them, so we gave them a lot of health. But it means that you never see them get destroyed.
Right.
And it also means that if they do get destroyed, the time to repair them is too long. So they've been reduced accordingly. So we may even see a couple of bridges get knocked out in competitive games if you're brave enough to use them. But yeah, the urban space that we made for 101 was more open than our urban spaces usually would be.
Okay.
Which is for the benefit of maneuverability. But I still can't wait to see some cat and mouse gameplay in that area.
Okay, so again, I know we've spent quite a bit of time talking about this map in our past
bunkers.
101 series.
It's the AT bunker, I think.
Is there anything else that you wanted to sort of cover off with day 101? What your expectations are, or some of the
how much range it has, man,
before players get their hands on it.
That's
honestly,
crazy.
I just hope people enjoy. This is one of those freebies where we made this for a different purpose, and we enjoy playing it enough that we wanted everyone to have their hands on it. And it would be a shame if we didn't. So I hope that you get to enjoy this as much as we did. Honestly, it is a blast to play on. It plays very differently to a lot of our maps. Again, very much that Co-1 style, if that's your flavor.
It did remind me of that.
I'm intrigued to see what feedback we get.
Yeah, I think I'm just biased because I sat with you through a lot of the creation of this, but this is definitely one of my favorite maps that's coming to the game.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, so let's maybe jump over and check out our new 101 map.
Which one is this?
I just said 101 map, but I meant 1v1 map.
One-on-one.
Okay, Will, which map is this?
This is Villa Fiore. This
I like
is
reminds me of
1v1
Co-1 as well.
Competitive map based in the estates and vineyards of rural Italy.
Is this actually one Marco Fiore's Italian estate?
I know Marco would like to say it is, so I'm willing to let him live with that belief. Whatever makes him happy.
Amazing. Okay.
Marco's always happy. Whatever continues to make him happy.
So again,
Marco's
let's
behind
start
the
with
Italian
sort of inspiration.
Battlegroup.
What were some of the historic
sure.
inspirations for Villafiore?
So these locations, these estates, were notorious throughout Italy, more so than they were in France. For those who don't really have the context of what a villa is anything as small as like a tiny 2-bed house, all the way up to a mansion.
A lot of elevation on this map. but
Usually,
looks
a
good.
villa in these days,
like
back
it.
in the 30s and the 40s, would be somewhere that land was held. So if you owned a villa, chances are you owned the land around it. And that is what this example is. It's a more wealthy estate that's sat on the top of a hill with lots of rural vineyards and farms around it. But
Looks beautiful, to be
in
honest.
Italy, they were notorious because they were usually almost always on hilltops. And there was very little cover between villas. So you would have armies trying to move across these very open rural landscapes, very exposed, and the only shelter was probably the easiest location to target because it stood out on a hill. So they were dominant positions. They had fantastic sight lines, but you were
Does that
almost
fortification
guaranteed to be
count as a
shelled if you
bunker?
broke them.
I guess it does.
And that was what most of the traversing across Italy was like. It was so commonplace, and it was very unpleasant. But in creating that, we wanted to have this pristine and beautiful location. It is almost entirely untarnished.
Right.
Unlike
So they
some
have
of our
that
maps
defensive
like
bonus, that
Torrente
little
or
icon
Interline,
when they get
because
close
we
to the
know that our
bunker.
players will absolutely destroy this. And we like having that juxtaposition of beauty being
Or not, I don't
absolutely
know.
destroyed. Yeah.
So as a more competitive map for the 1v1 crowd, can you sort of summarize your approach to designing this specifically?
Maybe it was a green
Yeah, so
cover.
this
It's
is one of those cases where we designed the
green
territory
cover.
first.
That's the icon.
Because we wanted this to be a competitive map from the off. This wasn't a map that was built from images like aerial photography or a story. The territory layout was done first. We made sure that worked with basic stubbed-in buildings and cover before we even started anything more on the process. And this is a clockwise rotation style map. So you'll notice when you play this for yourselves, the territory plays clockwise in your favor. So if you go out of your base to the left or forwards, you have a cutoff that you can secure easily. Then you have good resources towards the sides, like we're looking at here. A VP which is closer to you slightly than it is to your opponent. But your opponent has the same on their side. They head out of their base onto the right, and they end up going clockwise around the map, and they have the favor. The center is the neutral point. So you push through the center into the actual villa itself to try and help maintain or dominate control over the areas around you. But the sightlines from the villa are limited. You can't see the opposing VPs, you can't see the highest resources, but you can maneuver quite easily from the center of the map to the outskirts.
Yeah, and it looks like there's quite a bit of cover and different approaches that you can take to at least get to the base of the hill at the center there before you actually try and take it.
Yes, yeah. And it flows very, very nicely, this map. I'm quite pleased with how it came out. You see gameplay kind of moving in that rotation style that we wanted, rather than seeing an established front line across the center of the map, which you get with quite a few maps. This one is almost always moving.
That's really interesting
which
if
is
that actually
very, very
plays
pleasant
out
to see.
at the top
Like
level.
At the moment, for example, we're watching Marco versus Miguel, and we're seeing almost entirely all of our gameplay towards either the center or the left.
Right.
And there's very little happening on the right, and that's the intention. At the
Interesting.
moment, for example, I believe this is Miguel who's trying to secure the cutoff to cut Marco off. Marco's taken the center of the map, but he's left his cutoff exposed. So Miguel's taken a dive to try and capture it. Looks like he may struggle. But yeah, like the way this map works is you may see gameplay on about 66% of it at a time.
Okay.
And a third gets left out. So playing on this map 3 or 4 times, you'll see different ways of playing it every single time.
Okay, so you kind of talked about the rotational gameplay around the villa. What are some of the other notable features here? And again, what do you think players might discover as they play?
So this is one I'm particularly pleased with. I love how this folds out in the late game. Almost everything on this map is crushable. So even though looking around here, you've got quite a lot of hedges, you've got clumps of trees, you've got some height difference with some stone retaining walls, almost everything can be flattened.
I like that. That's
For example,
a cool
on the
addition.
screen at the moment, you can see some large barrels under a gazebo in the top there. You can drive a straight line from here to that victory point, through that building, through the hedgerows behind it. All these hedgerows at the around the outskirts of the villa, they can be crushed by light vehicles. They're not heavy crush. So this map really opens up once gameplay kicks in. In fact, you can change the dynamic of the cover around the villa with something as light as a Kettenkrad. You can knock out loads of gaps in this hedgerow here just by driving a Kradschutzen or a 4x4 through it, just to change the way that the area plays. If you
It's
want,
cool to have that nuance
say, a
and
machine
that
gun
technicality
in the house
behind the
on top
map.
of the hill to be more effective, drive to the enemy side, punch some holes into the hedgerows, and give them less to hide behind.
Yeah, I found even in my playtesting that having a Ketten or like a Weasel on hand to either remove cover or to very quickly decap points, like you mentioned, if we're only playing on 60% of the map, sometimes I would sneakily try and get a vehicle to that other third that we're not particularly concerned about, just to throw the enemy off and get them to sort of divert their focus.
Absolutely. Yeah, and again, it leans into the new battle groups having access to the artillery observers. They can leave a beacon behind to try and cover the parts of the map.
Artillery
that they
looks so
can't
good.
Babysit. And equally with the Italian coastal, they
Wow.
can just leave a bunker behind and hope that that's enough to hold it until vehicles like the Greyhound hit the field.
Okay. So, Will, is there anything else that you wanted to kind of cover off with this map? I know we've kind of gone through these quickly, but in terms of your approach to Villafiore, again, being a more competitive map, are there any sort of final thoughts that you want to leave with players before they jump in here to try and boost their elo?
I mean, above anything else, I always want to point out what we're releasing isn't set in stone. We are always watching live streams. We're always looking for feedback. So if you do see anything on any of our maps, not just these new ones, don't hesitate to post it in the Company of Heroes Discord. We're always keeping an eye out for little things that we haven't spotted. But with this map, aggression is going to be the key. You can't be passive on a map like this. If you're passive, you can easily get outmaneuvered. You can easily lose too much of the map. It really does favor the bold. If I'm not mistaken, this game is won because Marco just goes heavy into two Greyhounds and just outpaces Miguel. Not that Miguel loses. Miguel can never lose.
Of course not. He definitely doesn't lose this match.
Certainly not in public.
Well, we'll cut the video before that happens.
Yeah, it never happened.
Okay, well, I think that's a great preview of both Day 101 and Villafiore. I'm very excited for players to check these out.
If Miguel wanted to,
I will
he could
say,
obliterate Marco.
We did tease a while
Sorry,
ago
Marco.
that we are working on the integration of some community-made maps from the workshop. We hope to have more information on that in the future, but that is something I know, Will, you are hard at work on right now.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so again, just a bit of a tease for you. So, folks, we're very excited for you to check out these new maps. Will, thank you. Let me hang on. People want to see your face. So, Will, thank you so much for obviously working on these and for taking the time to chat about these new maps and share them with our players. before
Great
they
job,
get to check
Bacon.
them out.
Did a
My
great
absolute
job.
Pleasure.
Okay, so thanks, folks. That'll be it for now.
Thank you. Bye.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's noticeable. Yeah, this was so annoying. You could hardly select your units. See, yeah, you can see it highlighted now. just easily click the unit.
Before
So
we
much
chat
better.
about the new battle groups with our designers, I just wanted to quickly remind everyone that if you already have the premium edition of Company of Heroes 3, you'll automatically receive the Hammer and Shield pack. And this includes a premium cosmetic bundle, the British Forces Air and Sea Company for the single-player dynamic Italian campaign, the US Forces Advanced Infantry Battle Group, and the Wehrmacht Italian Coastal Battle Group, both of which can be used in any multiplayer mode or single-player match. If you don't have the premium edition, you can grab Hammer and Shield on Steam or at companyofheroes.com. You also have the option to earn the new battle groups, and you can unlock those via the in-game store for 10,000 merit each or 20,000 total. And earning merit should be a lot more enjoyable now, as we've completely overhauled our challenges system. We found that in the past, challenges were often too hard to complete or forced players to use strategies that weren't ideal. So we've standardized most of the challenges, made them easier to achieve, and rework the completion criteria.
Super
So
important.
now daily
We talked
challenges
about that
should
before.
only take you a match or two to complete, and weekly challenges will take just a bit more time than that. The other issue that we saw is that players would complete challenges but forget to manually claim their merit before it disappeared with the weekly reset. Now challenges will autocomplete after the end of each match if you've met the criteria. Here's a quick example of what the new system looks like, along with our new matchmaking flow.
I like the menu, man. Looks good. It's a lot darker. Oh, cool. Kind of like a black and white background.
It's done. The battle is ours. Stand down.
Yeah, it looks so good. It's claimed there automatically. Yeah, there was a lot of unnecessary steps. Looks good.
So keen-eyed observers will probably notice that with this new match flow, you can no longer queue dodge. And hopefully this makes the challenges system more fun and more rewarding for all of our players. Up next, we'll be doing a deep dive on the new battle groups with Miguel and Darren.
But there's some maps that are
Welcome, Commander. The US Forces Advanced
Undesirable.
Infantry Battle Group is one of 2 new battle groups coming in the Hammer and Shield update on December the 5th. Are you ready for Rangers to lead the way? These battle groups will be available for purchase on Steam and companyofheroes.com. If you own the premium edition, you will receive it for free on launch day, or you can unlock the battle groups using merit earned by completing challenges. So let's get into what's new about the USF Advanced Infantry Battle Group. The Advanced Infantry Battle Group is split between Infantry Operation and Field Ordnance. Let's take a look at Infantry Operation first.
so these are the Rangers.
Rangers are hand-picked volunteers with rigorous training, capable of firing any weapon whilst on the move. You can volunteer an existing rifleman squad to become Rangers, keeping their veterancy and acquired weapons.
That's so
or you can
good,
train
man.
a new squad from the barracks. Rangers are weapon experts, and this squad has the greatest amount of weapon slots. To help fill those weapon slots, you can call in a weapon crate drop, supplying yourself with flamethrowers, bazookas, or automatic rifles and machine guns. At Vet 1, you can select between 2 passive abilities, increasing their accuracy whilst on the move with steady aim, or my favorite is Cover to Cover, which gives offensive and defensive bonuses as you move to and
So
from
cool.
cover. Next, in Infantry Operation, you have the choice between Designate Assault Position and the Frontline Medical Tent. Designate Assault Position allows you to select an area for assault. All infantry will gain a defensive and speed bonus at the cost of weapon range. When used tactically, you'll be able to get your squads into solid fighting positions.
Very
The
interesting.
Frontline Medical Tent can be constructed outside of your headquarters without requiring engineers. Accessible with only a few command points, you'll be able to patch up your troops and maintain your riflemen and rangers on the battlefield.
I actually think this is going to be really strong
The
against
weapon
Wehrmacht
training
in
passive
particular.
ability enhances the performance of weapons that rangers acquire in the field. Flamethrowers will slow enemy infantry. Bazookas reduce the rate of fire of their target. Whilst the
6-man
Browning
bazooka
automatic
squad.
rifle and machine gun can suppress at close
Firing on the
range.
move. That's insane.
Any other weapons will have increased accuracy.
How is that
Infantry
balanced?
assault calls in 3 rifle squads and 2 bazooka squads to a target location. These squads cannot be controlled and will proceed to the destination with an attack move command. They will remain to keep your enemy tied up in combat before retreating.
That's a really cool
Useful
ability.
for a decoy attack to distract your enemy whilst you attack another location, or simply overpowering your enemy with overwhelming numbers. Moving over to the field ordnance tree, your first choice is between artillery observers and the ammunition storage. Scouts can be upgraded to artillery observers. They get a line of sight increase, which I find useful for spotting enemies without engaging. Artillery observers also gain the ability to construct artillery radio beacons. These radio beacons automatically bombard enemies, and the frequency of bombardments can be increased if monitored by artillery observers. The ammunition storage can be constructed by engineers. This increases the damage and ability cooldowns of nearby emplacements and weapon teams. Be careful though, as this cache is highly explosive, and when destroyed, it will hurt nearby units.
It's really interesting for USF.
The M2A1 howitzer can be constructed by engineers on the field. This long-range artillery piece fires 105mm high explosive rounds, and like all on-map artillery units, they do not cost munitions to fire regular rounds.
So it's going to cool
The
down
105 can
quicker.
be further upgraded with free-fire drills, enabling
that
it to
ammunition storage.
auto-fire.
This
The
is going to be really good, I
devastating
think.
Overwatch it can provide when combined with the ammunition storage is intense and will likely attract attention. So be careful.
It serves a different
If you need
purpose
more
than the whiz
immediate
bang.
artillery support, then the 155mm rapid artillery has you covered. The speed at which heavy shells will rain down upon a target has tremendous shock value. Welcome, Commander. The Wehrmacht Italian Coastal Battle Group is one of 2 new battle groups coming to the Hammer and Shield update on December the 5th. This battle group promotes hunkering down, creating defensive lines, and whittling down the enemy with powerful artillery.
Dude, this is going to be so
Both
strong
battle
in
groups
team
will
games,
be
I think.
available in Hammer and Shield, which is available for purchase on Steam and companyofheroes.com. If you own the premium edition, you will receive it for free on launch day, or you can unlock the battle group using merit earned by completing challenges. So let's take a look at what's new under your command. The Italian coastal is split into heavy
Oh,
fortifications
jeez.
and coastal forces. Let's review coastal forces first.
I'm really curious
Coastal
about this
reserves
battle
are
group.
a 6-man squad immediately available upon selecting the battle group. They might not be leading any heroic charges, but they will serve to bolster your defenses and work best when firing from fortified positions. Besides getting an extra squad mate at Ved 2, this squad will slowly replenish their
Oh, look at
numbers
that,
for free
7-man.
when near bunkers, and benefit from many other abilities available in the battle group, such as the Artillery Officer. The Artillery Officer provides an array of supportive bonuses.
So
Friendly
cool.
units occupying the same sector gain increased construction speed and ability recharge times, making the Artillery Officer a great unit to move around to establish defensive perimeters.
I love the utility behind
With
the officer
veterancy,
unit.
the sector bonuses will also include accuracy increase, damage reduction, and suppression resistance. The Artillery Officer also has 3 abilities. They can watch an area and call in a light bombardment when enemies are present, supervise
Bombardment looks
buildings
so
to
good.
increase production speed or increase the rate of fire of a bunker, and
No way.
lastly, at Veterancy 1, can inspire nearby units to increase their rate of fire and accuracy.
A lot of skill
The
required to
OBJ
really optimize that unit.
210-22 is a large howitzer emplacement that is constructed by pioneers. Its shells are capable of damaging anything it hits, making
Yeah,
it
this-
one of the fiercest artillery pieces
This thing looks
currently.
super strong.
Nothing hits quite like this.
What a beautiful new improvement
Coastal
of the
Wall
graphics.
reduces the manpower and munition costs of your field defenses. Fighting nests, mines, bunkers, and bunker upgrades are all affected. It might not be quite as flashy as the OBJ, but it will help you create mighty, impenetrable fortifications.
Jeez,
for
man.
much less command points. And it
The AT
synergizes
bunkers
well
are gonna
with
be
many
ridiculous, I
abilities
think.
from the heavy fortifications tree.
They have
There
so
are
much
2
range.
new bunkers for the Italian Coastal Battle Group, and by choosing this ability, your pioneers will be able to construct them.
So that's a reconnaissance
Command
one.
bunker reduces the damage nearby bunkers receive and can be used as a retreat point.
Oh, okay. So
The
command
anti-tank
bunker.
bunker is a Pack 40 contained in concrete. Let's see the enemy decrew that.
This is going to be the stronger one, I think.
Designate defensive line can be used on a sector point or bunker. Once activated, it will restore the health of nearby infantry and reduce incoming damage. This ability will persist until the sector is decaptured.
So you could use it on a
or the
resource
bunker
point.
is destroyed.
Really
Making
interesting.
it an extremely strong defensive ability the longer you can endure. I'd find a key area you want to defend that's likely going to see a lot of action. It might even dissuade enemies from attacking in the first place. Designate a bunker with artillery overwatch, firing artillery at nearby enemies
That's
in
so
vision
cool.
at a moderate cost
Defensively.
of munitions. Building bunkers in key positions will be integral to getting effective
I
use
like this
out of
ability a lot,
ability.
personally.
Getting more bunkers on the field will give you more freedom with other battle group abilities.
See how fast
like
they build
artillery
sandbags?
Overwatch
That's
or
insane.
designate defensive line, as well as replenish your coastal reserves. Rapid fortification will help by granting you a bunker that can construct itself at a reduced cost. If your positions are getting hammered and you need to hold the line, then call in the reserves. All bunkers will provide free reinforcements periodically and make infantry harder to hit. It's the ultimate defensive ability to use when trying to hold off multiple enemy advances.
I like this as well. I think it's a
Lastly,
cool feature.
Bulwark is a
Cool
passive ability
mechanic.
that increases the health of your bunkers. Bunkers will also self-repair when out of combat, which will be
That's
extremely useful if you've created
super
a complex
strong.
network of fortifications.
That's ridiculously
You're
strong
now
if the
briefed
artillery
on the
doesn't wipe
Wehrmacht
out the
Italian
bunker.
coastal battle
You'll just be
group.
able to
Any
self-repair.
questions, then ask them in the comments or the Company of Heroes Discord. Defensive playstyles can be tough for the enemy to break through, but if you can endure their attacks, victory is yours.
I want to take a closer look at the battle groups a little bit later in the video. So here's the flagpole changes before. Pretty basic. Now we have the resource point. The flag is rising to the top.
Hey everyone, and now I am here with Darren and Miguel, and we're talking about the all-new battle groups coming to Company of Heroes 3 as part of the Hammer and Shield pack.
All right, this is going to be interesting.
For folks that don't know you, Darren, who are you and what do you do on Company of Heroes?
Hey, my name's Darren Chen, and I'm one of the gameplay designers at Relic Entertainment, and you might have used to know me as Mirage Fly back in the day. A very long time ago.
Back in the day. What about you, Miguel? Who are you and how did people know you back in the day?
Darren is one of my
Yeah,
favorite.
very similar to Darren here. People might know me as a DevM. I used to be a competitive player, but now I'm here as a gameplay designer.
All washed up as a gameplay designer.
Retired.
Retired. Okay, so again, we're really excited that we have these two new battle groups, the U.S. Forces Advanced Infantry and the Wehrmacht Italian Coastal coming to the game on December 5th, along with Steel Shepherd as part of the Hammer and Shield pack. So let's just kind of talk about these new battle groups with the two folks that were sort of responsible for ushering them into the world. So at a high level, I'm curious, what were some of the design goals with these new battle groups? Like, why do we pick these themes? How do we approach building them to sort of complement their factions? Miguel, let's maybe start with you and the U.S. Forces.
Yeah, so with these new battle groups, we wanted new and unique ways to play these factions. And on top of that, we also wanted to give them some of the tools that they were missing. So specifically for the U.S. Advanced Infantry, the U.S. forces were missing some of these artillery pieces that other factions had.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to offer it to them. We also wanted them to offer more abilities. So not only the artillery units, but more ways to kind of break into the enemy position. Those were somewhat of the main inspirations behind this Advanced Infantry battle group.
What about you, Darren? Can you talk about some of the inspiration for the Italian Coastal?
I guess we got the exact opposite of the Advanced Infantry battle group, where or the coastal is very much to be our like first main battle group that is primarily focused on defense and emplacements. None of our battle groups actually focus that are even none of our battle groups that are more defensive related rely as heavily on emplacements as the coastal battle group, and we very much wanted those emplacements to be a core part of your game plan. We didn't want them to just be, okay, maybe I pick the bunker like once every 5 games. This is very much that you will have bunkers up as part of your gameplay.
And it kind of feels like these two battle groups are kind of mirror images of each other, in that they sort of maybe not necessarily directly counter each other, but one's a little bit aggressive and heavy on artillery. The other's a little bit defensive and heavy on bunkers. Was that sort of a conscious decision that we made?
Yes, it was very much intended that they would play off each other. We foresee that many people will be playing these battle groups when they come out, especially considering that the US forces were missing those tools. It made so much sense to somewhat package the two of them together.
So let's maybe talk about battle groups sort of at a higher level here before we get into the nuts and bolts with these two new ones. I'm kind of curious, how would a battle group compare to some of our past systems in the franchise that would augment a faction? I'm thinking specifically about the Doctrine system in Company of Heroes 1 or the Commanders in Company of Heroes 2. So when we look at Company of Heroes 3, how do battle groups sort of compare to those old systems?
Yeah, so our battle groups had a very heavy inspiration from Company of Heroes 1. When
That's
we
really
did the
good to
initial
hear.
assessment of how we wanted to go forward with these battle groups, we had a look at Company of Heroes 2 commanders and obviously Co-1 doctrines. The Company of Heroes 1 doctrine system had 2 linear paths, but the fact that you could choose between what path to take in them meant that they had some depth to them, and we really liked that aspect of them. Company of Heroes 2 was a lot more linear. It was a lot more about what commander to pick, rather than once you lock into a commander, what choices you make.
100%.
So for a new iteration of battle groups, we wanted to lean on these like meaningful choices that Company of Heroes 1 somewhat started. But that does mean that Company of Heroes 3 battle group has basically double the abilities that the Company of Heroes 2 commander has. And on top of that, we don't really do the reuse of abilities. Company of Heroes 2 commanders had, for the most part, usually 1 or 2 abilities that would be reused from another commander. And we also have usually more unique units per battle group as well. So many of our battle groups have 2 to 3 unique units in them. And each unit that you add to a battle group, it's a very heavy cost in terms of production, because you go from art to animation to the VO or
The voiceover.
and even the design iteration is a lot more heavy than it used to, because now you need to consider all these paths that the player takes, and you need to consider that do they have enough abilities that, for example, cost ammunition. That's so what we call as ammunition sinks in a battle group. Not only that, but is the pacing of the battle group proper? Like between choice A and B, are the players going 50% of the time pick A and 50% of the time pick B? And if not, does the battle group have like a space in team games? So there's like lots of considerations just that come from the nature,
Right.
that we're offering a lot more paths with these battle groups.
Yeah, and Darren, I think one thing you were saying to me off.
So the really important thing about what Miguel just said is that the Co3 battle group design is based on improving the Company of Heroes 1 doctrine design. And I think it's really important because, as Miguel said, what Co1 did very, very well was it not only had options, but the doctrine itself, the battle group itself, was thematically intact, right? So the airborne battle group, or a Luftwaffe battle group, they're going to do exactly what you would expect a airborne or Luftwaffe or an armored battle group to do, right? It's not going to have a bunch of abilities that are random and they're just thrown in, because you don't want to have a battle group that's a jack of all trades. That's not good gameplay design. You want to be choosing a set of specific abilities and units and a specific theme at the cost of not having other abilities and units and themes, right? So there's a trade-off in your strategic decision. And I think that's what they're really trying to do with Co 3's battle groups is kind of improve upon that system because Co 2 was the big learning lesson, in my opinion. Commanders were cool because, like, you know, thematically, oh, you're locking into a commander himself and you've got all these abilities. But Co 2's problem was that you really only had a couple units or abilities that were actually unique. Everything else was kind of pulled from other commanders across the game or other, you know, stock units across the game. And on top of that, the problem was that the commanders oftentimes did too much, right? They had too many abilities that covered multiple problem points. So, you know, like you had commanders that had too much crossover between each other. Like, why do I need 4 or 5 commanders all with tiger tanks at the end as my call-in? You know what I mean? Like that, and some have strafing runs, some have artillery, right? I don't like that design. So I really like that they're keeping things unique and thematic. I think it's just way better design overall. But let's go ahead and hear what Darren has to say.
Camera before we started is that with the battle groups, as opposed to maybe the commanders in Company of Heroes 2, in Co 2 you'd still be really reliant on your core roster for your faction. But in Co 3 with the battle groups, that's not necessarily the case. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, even compared to like prior Co games, I would even consider Co 1 in this. A lot of our battle groups, particularly on factions like the USF, they are complete mutators to the army. Like they can completely change up how you build, and what units you build. Like some of our battle groups, you can get away with not even building the core units. Like if you go airborne into like Pathfinders, then into paratroopers, you might not even build the barracks at that point, like which is the typical gameplay plan for USF. Or you might go into US Armored, and you might go into Mass Assault Engineers, into Weapon Support Center,
Right.
And then rely more on the vehicle play.
It's cool
than you
gameplay
are
design.
relying
I
on
like
the
it.
Rifleman play, a for the American Core Army.
So that's thank you both for the insight on that, because I know that we often get questions about like, well, how do these systems differ? So it's good to have some insight there. So let's maybe talk about battle group testing. Can you maybe talk about maybe some of our initial battle group testing, like maybe even way back before Company of Heroes 3 launched? You know, how long have we been potentially kicking around some of these ideas for the new battle groups, and what was sort of the process to get them from like an idea on a whiteboard somewhere to actually being in the game? Miguel, let's maybe start with you.
Yeah, these battle groups, the idea has been there for years now, as I'm sure people know from going through the files of the game. But it still is a challenge to bring them to life. For example, one of the challenges we faced with the US Advanced Infantry is that the original idea was very rifleman focused, for example. And on the live environment, riflemen already have plenty of choices to choose that already enhances them. So it didn't make much sense to continue to pursue this idea. So even though these battle groups, the idea have been there for years, there's a lot of iteration that went through after that to make sure that they fit the game in its current environment. Not only that, but because the battle groups somewhat are new to the game, we also wanted them to feel very different from the other ones and play really differently. And that brings a whole new set of challenges as well, that we already have many units and many abilities in the game, just from 10 abilities per battle group, and it's 3 battle groups per faction. There's a lot of ideas already in there. So there was a big challenge in how would we make these play differently and still fit the theme and bring out the best out of these unique units that players are expecting, like the Rangers.
Darren, what about you? I'm curious what sort of like the testing and the entire design process for the battle groups was like on your end, especially considering you were really focused on the Italian coastal.
So originally, coastal was not designed to be as heavy bunker play. It was a lot more into the old vein of being very mobile, like 1 and 2, where we're pretty stripped back on defenses. But we look back at the Coastal Battle Group, and one of the things we noticed it never really played very defensively as we wanted on initial iterations. A lot of it was just a very aggressive, especially we had games where you would never build a bunker, you would never build the defenses, you were always out on the map just playing the game like it was just your standard Wehrmacht sort of play, except you just changed 1 to 2 units in your roster, where over time we eventually leaned more and more on the bunkers and more around the setup of the bunkers and using those as strong points for its various abilities.
Wow.
Because
I'm
very
curious
much
how
we
strong it
wanted the
actually is.
gameplay for Coastal to be different from the standard Wehrmacht. We want you to be building those emplacements, we want you to be building those bunkers, and we want you to be doing this sort of setup for your like powerful abilities on the heavy fortification side of the tree, where you can't just like select an area and that's going to be bombed. You need your bunker set up in a specific position, but once that bunker is set up, you get very powerful and cheaper ability because you have that initial setup.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I kinda
Darren
like how
doesn't
you
pull
put
any
that. You're not
punches, man.
necessarily
He
always
loves
resting
bunkers.
on your laurels with the battle group, right? You are being aggressive, but then you're setting up those strong points, like you call them, so that you can better control the flow of the match. So let's maybe actually talk about these battle groups in a little bit more detail, and let's take a quick look at their tech trees. So
Okay,
let's
thank
start
you.
with the-
That's what I want to
Let's start with
see.
the Wehrmacht Italian Coastal.
All right.
Darren, can you maybe walk us through the left side of this tech tree for the battle group with the heavy fortifications?
Yeah, sure. We can go down, and I'll go by tier. So we'll start with the top and go down to bottom. So our first one, and it's probably my favorite one, designate defensive line. It's one of those abilities where you designate a friendly territory point or bunker, and until that point is decaptured or the bunker is destroyed, or you move the designate defense line to a new area of the map, your infantry will fight better or in that area. They'll be harder to kill. On top of that, when you're out of combat, your units will heal. So this allows the
that's
coastal
good.
player to stay on the map and not require like in-base healing or like multiple medical bunkers to be set up. You can just set up a strong point immediately where you need to. So as long as you have like either the initial territory or that bunker, but as an exclusive choice, and I think a lot more people will have fun with this one, is our support bunkers. So first, the support bunkers offers you 2 new bunkers. You get the command bunker, which provides a defensive aura to nearby bunkers and units around it, as well as acting as a retreat point, though you do have to build this object. And our alternative
Wow,
to
that's really good.
the command bunker, and you can upgrade this on
That's
regular
insane.
bunkers or also build it in the field, is the anti-tank bunker, which is essentially a pack 40 with slightly more range mounted inside a bunker. And this allows the coastal player to control certain areas of the map against armored vehicles.
I think that's going to be even better, man. The AT bunkers.
Going down to our next tier, we have
So
designate
good.
artillery overwatch. So essentially,
So, like, the one thing about this is it's an exclusive choice, of course. So, I feel like both of these abilities are really good. And I haven't play tested it. I have no idea. But from what I'm hearing, I think both of these choices are great choices. And I like the fact that there's not a obvious power imbalance between the two. There could be. So if you go for designate defensive line, your fortifications are going to be centered around the traditional bunkers, of course, right? And the designate defensive line can be used on a bunker or a resource point, from my understanding. So it's a much more mobile and flexible buff versus having support bunkers, which obviously are going to offer different levels of support. Whether it's the command bunker, you're going to have a retreat point, you're going to have a territorial buff, but it's based on the location of the bunker itself. And the AT bunker is just going to be phenomenal anti-tank, especially in team games, because in a 1v1, the battle is spread out across the map. So bunkers don't necessarily have the same impact. They don't really have the same impact at all, especially when you look at the economic cost and opportunity cost behind them. But in a team game where it's more of this like laney interaction between you and your direct opponent, right? Up and down or sideways, right? It's a lane, quote unquote. So that lane and that layered defensive position, or that layered position with your units across the map, is really going to be supported by these bunkers. I feel like it's going to be extremely strong. The other thing about it is, if you notice, they are incorporating these bunkers while also adding a lot of artillery to the game. So the USF is going to have artillery to counteract these bunkers, whereas in the previous meta, they wouldn't have that artillery necessarily. But the thing is about this, rapid fortification, bulwark, these other abilities, is if these bunkers can self-repair and they're strong and they're able to be resilient against artillery, they're going to be sponges soaking up all that artillery, which is not going to the actual units in the armies necessarily, in theory. And that's going to give a major advantage, you would think, to that player. So I feel like there's going to be somewhat of a power spike, let's say in the mid-game for the Wehrmacht Italian Coastal, because the early game, you're not going to be really relying on these bunkers. In the late game, there's a lot more tools available to a enemy team to deal with the bunkers. But that mid game is really going to offer, I think, a lot of interesting tempo and value, kind of like a power spike for the Italians, Wehrmacht Italian Coastal. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's like my general prediction on it. Now let's go ahead and see what these other abilities have in store.
You select one of your bunkers on the field, and in a wide radius, nearby enemies are going to be attacked by light artillery. This is particularly effective against infantry assaults and very good at stopping like massed infantry attacks.
Yeah, this is my panic button.
Yep, it is the panic button used to get infantry off your bunkers. It essentially allows you to create a zone of control.
It's really
Alternatively,
cool.
you could say set your bunker behind an obstacle and also then create a zone of control, so as long as you have sight into those other areas.
I think that's the way to go.
It was a big Overwatch ability.
Put
and
that
on the right
behind a
side,
building or something.
we have rapid fortification, which is fairly straightforward, but it should be helpful for people who want to rebuild those defensive lines. Is you essentially are allowed to just place a bunker in friendly territory, and that is going to auto-construct itself. And yeah, you can essentially just get
Wow.
a slightly cheaper bunker that just builds itself in your own territory without needing like a unit to be there to set it up.
Yeah, definitely handy.
That's
in a
pretty
pinch.
cool.
And our final two abilities, we have Call to Reserve. So similar to Designate Artillery Overwatch and Designate Defensive Line, this is one of your setup abilities. So you need a bunker on the field for this to activate, but once it's activated, your infantry will be harder to hit during this period. But in addition to that, every 10 seconds this ability is active, any infantry squad who has lost a model is going to regain a member. So this allows you to essentially self-sustain your force on a heavy defensive fight. And this is one of your endgame abilities for that side of the tree. More straightforward, and it's a passive ability. We have Bulwark, which is
Okay, hold on. So if I'm understanding this right, the Call to Reserves is going to be only usable on a bunker. So you have to be really strategic about where you put your bunker. And then it's a sphere of influence. It's a zone where you're going to get defensive buffs and 10-second reinforcements. So to your units, and I think that's every 10 seconds, he said. So basically what you're going to want is to consolidate your army and hold a position by calling in the reserves. That way your opponent is going to be forced to back off. You're going to have really good value in cost efficiency in terms of combat. Very interesting. Now let's go ahead and see what Bulwark is. This seems good to me as well. Just like Designate Defensive Line and Support Bunkers are like really difficult choices, I feel like Designate Artillery Overwatch and Rapid Fortification are both good as well, but they're less important choices. Although I really like the Artillery Overwatch. And then I feel like these two choices are once again really, really important. They're both very strong. But let's see what Bulwark is. He said it's a passive.
which allows you to have more health on your bunkers. And in addition to that, your bunkers will slowly auto repair out of combat. This will not out repair things like artillery, but it will help you top bunkers off and also allow you
I feel like that's the
focus
stronger
your force
ability.
on the offense rather than having like your coastal reserves focusing on repairing your bunkers.
I think Bulwark is stronger than
and that's,
Call to
I think,
Reserves.
a really good segue to the coastal forces.
Okay, so I think there's probably like several different ways to open this battle group, like in terms of build orders, and it's really going to depend on the team dynamic, the map, the style of play. I feel like there's way more ways to play this than I'm going to describe, but to me, what feels stronger would be support bunkers in a team game scenario, large team game scenario rather, let's say like a 3v3 or predominantly 4v4. So going from support bunker, I think designate artillery overwatch. I think that's better than rapid fortification, because this is all about like not needing your units necessarily, but if you're using your coastal reserves and you want them near your bunkers, I feel like you can get away without rapid fortifications. They already build very quick from my understanding. So support bunkers, designate artillery overwatch, it's going to really enhance your ability to be resilient and hold positions. And then straight into bulwark, I feel like bulwark is going to allow you to self-repair. It's going to have a lot of passive value bonuses. I think that's the way to go. And then another way to go would be like designate defensive line with call the reserves. Now you have these like massive flexible buffs where you can be defending or engaging in multiple areas around the map in a more dynamic way. So I don't know, like there could be other ways to play it. Like maybe you go to designate defensive line and you end up at bulwark, right? Like maybe you go like down here and across. I don't know. But what seems the strongest is like this and like this, right? Okay, let's go into coastal forces.
Yep, onto our we have the Coastal Reserve Squad. So this is a cheap 6-man squad that is effective when fighting in cover, particularly at long range. They just want to keep their distance from the enemy. But one of their biggest traits compared to most other infantry squads in the game at the start is they are very fast at building they're very fast at building pretty much anything that they can construct. So
yeah, you
can
saw it with the
consider them
sandbags.
a combat builder unit. So you can use them to quickly establish your bunkers, your mines, your barbed wire, tank traps, all the construction items that are found in the Coastal Battle Group, the Coastal Reserves can build. And on top of that, at the Coastal Reserves, second main feature is they will automatically get a reinforcement every so often off a bunker. This is to encourage Coastal Reserves to build those bunkers and fight near them.
Does automatic
rather
mean
than
free?
going off on their own and
I
trying to
assume it
capture up
does.
the map like most other infantry.
What would be some of
That's
the,
pretty
the
good.
drawbacks to using the coastal reserves over, say, like your standard, Pioneer?
We would be comparing them more to the standard Grenadier, but if we compare them to the Pioneer, Coastal Reserves can't repair vehicles, they can repair structures. Compared
Makes
to the
sense.
Grenadier, the Coastal Reserves, while they have an anti-tank grenade, they don't have the standard grenade, so they're not as good on the offense, and you
Oh,
can't
wow.
merge them into your more elite squads to sustain them on the field. And
that
your Coastal
that's
Reserves are
interesting.
also worse when they're fighting out of cover or not near the bunker, so they're not as good as pushing as other units are or supporting your more elite forces.
Right.
Okay, so they're really playing into this whole defensive idea, which they alluded to earlier. You're really going to want to play around cover, around bunkers in particular, with the coastal reserves. So, like the issue for Wehrmacht, and this is really playing into the defensive theme. The issue for Wehrmacht is the Wehrmacht gets on the back foot really early. The first 7 minutes of the game, I consider like the archetypal early game or whatever you would call it. It's the early game. And the first 7 minutes, I feel like the Wehrmacht is on the back foot, and the Wehrmacht is not really able to like put the USF in particular on the back foot, right? They're not able to really take the fight to the USF as well. So you're really going to have to play into this defensive style, which is cool. I love defensive play styles. I like the fact that it's extremely thematic in that way. You have to kind of play into the mechanics. I think it's very strategic. You have to be very deliberate about your location placements and your unit placements. I really like it. I just wonder how strong it's going to be in 1v1 when a U.S. forces player is spreading you thin. So the coastal reserves having the defensive bonuses and cover is good, but how about attacking? You're not going to have grenades. You're going to have AT grenades, which are once again defensive, right? For enemy armor making incursions into your bunkers or your positions. So yeah, I'm just really curious more so how this is going to do and perform against the USF. Because coastal reserves, if they're comparative to the Grenadiers in terms of combat, it doesn't solve some of the issues that the American battle group offers, which is, well, we have this new really beefy unit. It's called the Ranger. And it's not only stronger than your Pigren and your Jaeger squad, but your Italian combat unit is also going to get shredded. So that's the question. That's what I'm wondering. From a thematic standpoint, balance aside, I actually really like this. I'm more excited about this one than the USF one, personally, just because I think it's like a really cool theme. But let's go ahead and see what else is in store.
Now let's talk about what I think is the secret powerhouse of this battle group. What's up with the artillery officer?
So the artillery officer, as we designed him, he is probably the only infantry unit in the game that is not reliant on actually fighting. As a unit, he can be considered as Company of Heroes 3's infantry spellcaster.
Yeah,
he is
he's
primarily
cool,
reliant on an ability to attack called Artillery Overwatch that
I
allows
really
him
like
to
this
essentially
unit.
designate a small zone. And anyone in that zone is going to be attacked by light artillery, so as long as the officer is channeling that ability. And that keeps happening until he either moves or is giving a new order. On top of that, the officer's other abilities, he speeds up the construction speed of your units in friendly or neutral territory, as well as their ability recharge times, making him useful for being near your coastal reserves to build even faster, or being near units like mortars or artillery, so they can get their barrages recharged faster.
Okay. And what about our last choice here on the right-hand side?
Speaking of recharging faster, we have the Obiche 21022s. So this is our heaviest artillery in the game. It's not quite the B4 from Company of Heroes 2. It doesn't fire a single shot. This will fire 3 rounds at a very slow pace, but it does pack the most damage out of any artillery gun in the game. On top of that, it also benefits from a number of benefits that, say, the artillery officer can give it if he's in
Super cool.
the sector or supervising the Obiche. But in general, the Obiche is the heaviest artillery gun in the game, aimed at you can fire from long range, and it's pretty much effective against anything that it hits.
Wow.
Sorry. What kind of
SimCity's
bonus
back,
does the artillery officer
seems
provide
like.
to the Obiche?
So not on top of that area supervise, just by being in the sector for the ability recharge times, the artillery officer can also supervise things like the Obiche, the bunkers, and production structures to either get their upgrades or units produced faster. But on top of that, if it's like an offensive structure, those units will fire 40% faster. So this slow firing Obiche
Wow.
will considerably speed up its time between shells if the officer is overwatching it.
Okay.
That's insane, man. This officer is such a cool design in terms of all the different utilities behind the unit. It's not only, usable in combat, but has all these other abilities ranging from improving the rate of fire of the Obiche, as they said, to increasing the production speed of a unit back at base. So, and there's several more abilities that they describe, but all of these abilities require the unit to be in different places at different times based on what you're trying to optimize. So this unit, what I like about it is it's a high skill cap unit. What I like about it is that you can really be deliberate about where it's being placed and what it's being used for to manipulate a build order or playstyle. Let's say you really want to get a Wirbelwind or a Panzer IV out as quick as possible. Well, that extra 15, 20 seconds is going to make a difference if you're optimizing for that. So I really, really enjoy this unit. I think it fits well into the whole theme and the design, the defensive design with the, artillery as well. What a cool unit. I think that might be one of my favorite units in the game so far. All right, let's continue and see what... I want to hear about this coastal wall. I don't know what it does.
Supervising it.
Yeah, that sounds scary. So what about Coastal Wall?
And Coastal Wall is our last ability on the right side of the tree that...
What does this do?
Competing with the Obiche, it is primarily a cost reduction, and it is there to reduce the cost on all your bunkers, all your bunker upgrades, and landmines to allow you to essentially build like a defense in depth sort of strategy and make it easier to rebuild defenses. As we find in Company of Heroes in particular, once the late game starts rolling around, it's very easy to remove defenses with a variety of things, be it
That's really
anti-tank
strong,
guns, tanks,
I think.
mortars, heavy artillery, off maps. So the Coastal Wall allows the coastal player to have an easier time rebuilding those sort of field defenses because they're not cutting as hard into his income.
Okay, so I would rather have the Obiche because it's so much cooler, having this massive artillery unit. But the coastal wall, I feel like is way stronger than it may seem. And the one thing that's interesting is like my first impression was, okay, I'm locking into heavy fortifications and I'm going down this left side immediately. Whereas now that I hear this, I'm starting to think that in terms of, economic value and scalability of the battle group, you might want to be going down coastal reserves into artillery officer straight into coastal wall, because the quicker you have this ability that is going to reduce the cost and time of your utility mines, production, bunkers, the quicker you get this out, the less tax on your economy you have in terms of manpower, munitions, and all that Rajafal just alluded to. So if you have coastal wall and now you have support bunkers and bulwark, well, and you're laying mines everywhere and you're setting up bunkers, well, you're not spending as much money on that anymore, that infrastructure. Now a lot of more of your economy is going towards your actual standing army, which can also function as, counterattacking and going on the offensive. I feel like that's really good. Now, it's at the cost of the Obiche, which is going to be your real late game power puncher. So it's a big trade-off. What I like about it is these are tough decisions, like really tough decisions, it feels like. But I like how you can play it in multiple ways. I'm already thinking of like several different build orders and ways to open in different styles. So I like that a lot personally. But let's continue.
Amazing. It looks like a scary battle group. So I'm curious, Miguel, what are your as a
Technical
U.S.
battle group.
forces
There's a lot to it.
enjoyer? I'm curious, what are your sort of high level thoughts on the Italian coastal?
Playing against it or with it?
Either or.
It's pretty scary playing against the coastal. The amount of times that the assault infantry from the U.S. infantry battle group that we'll be having a look at was faced with the Overwatch from the bunkers was my infantry got all killed. But yeah, it's a very nice battle group for people that are looking into locking down parts of the map.
Mm-hmm.
And even from a 1v1 perspective and 2v2, so the kind of game modes with less people, it's still a very useful battle group. I think historically these battle groups in Company of Heroes have had a hard time somewhat fitting into those game modes. But this battle group is pretty good at being able to just fortify a position really quickly and be able to reinforce around it.
Cool. Very cool.
I just can't wait for people to have their hands on it. Especially the Obiche is so nice to use whenever you blow up something with it.
It's very satisfying.
Yes.
Okay, so let's jump over and take a look at the U.S. Forces Advanced Infantry.
Yes.
All right, so Miguel, can you walk us through the left-hand side of this tree, please?
Yeah, so we start off with the Rangers. So the Rangers are meant to be somewhat of a replacement to Riflemen. It was a very deliberate decision that you're going to be replacing a Rifleman with Rangers. We didn't want both the Rifleman and Rangers to kind of coexist in like a large amount of numbers. So you're making a decision here. And the special thing about the Rangers is that they can fire weapons on the move. And that is pretty significant for weapons like the flamethrowers and the bazookas specifically, and even some LMGs.
On the move, dude. That's insanely strong.
But the core idea behind the Rangers is that they are a very elite unit. We kind of designed them as they're supposed to kind of be equivalent to 2 units in terms of cost. So they're pretty costly to even call in, but they're even more costly to maintain. So you need to be really careful on the amount of soldiers that die from the squad. That is a very deliberate decision that we made with them. They're also meant to be somewhat of the spearhead behind your assault. They're very resilient, and even through their passive abilities like cover to cover, they are meant to be able to break the enemy line and be the first squad to get in there and get up and close with their Thompsons. So this unit, I'm very excited. There's also the fact that they can hold up to 6 weapons. And what that basically means is that you can spec your Rangers into different roles for your army. So you can spec your Rangers with perhaps 2 bazookas, and they'll have a good mix between anti-infantry and anti-tank. or you can even put 2 flamethrowers on them, or like a mix of weapons.
Wow.
Now, the interesting thing with Rangers is that the weapons that come in are random, and that basically means
they're
that it is
random.
pretty hard to get the same weapon multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
And
Interesting.
that is also very intentional to allow players to somewhat adapt on the fly to the situation, and not
Little
having
RNG
the full
there.
counters out for what the enemy has. They need to adapt, and that is a very interesting choice that somewhat naturally comes out of that. Is that with the Rangers, you need to adapt a lot to the weapons that you're given.
Right.
Wow.
And with their weapon call in, even though they can hold 6, I believe you only get 2 for 100
Yes.
munitions.
Yes, so
Okay.
it's if you think about
Still
it, with
really
100
good.
munitions, and each ammunition crate comes with 2 weapons, and sometimes you don't even want to like grab that weapon for that ranged squad specifically, right? So it's a huge investment to get a ranger fully spec'd with the 6 weapons,
Right.
and even making those weapons make sense. Because, for example, you could, in theory, have 6 bazookas, but do you really want heavy investment on a ranger squad that is basically going to be useless against other infantry, right? So I'm very excited for this unit in specific and see what players can imagine the unit to be.
In terms of heavy investment, how much does
But
it
yeah,
cost?
moving up
That's what I want to know.
to the medical tent and to the designated assault.
So the Ranger, I have a few opinions on this. Number one, I think it's going to be extremely strong, and I haven't play tested it, so I don't really know. Hearing that it's going to be a little bit random in terms of weapon selection is interesting RNG I wasn't expecting in the game, but it's also probably for the better because of the balance, you know? It won't make this unit as efficient as it could be at particular points in the game. The real big question is how expensive is this Ranger, not only to upgrade to from the Rifleman, but also to reinforce for upkeep. That's a really important part of the manpower economy. So I really need to know how expensive this is before we determine how strong it is. And I really want to know how spammable the unit is. I hope that the unit is not able to be just relied upon in itself. Like 3 or 4 of these would be silly in my opinion. From what I'm hearing Miguel say, that it's more of that specialized spearheading type of unit. You know, with its cover to cover and different abilities. I really hope that it's a unit that you have to be very, very particular about, a unit that is so expensive in some ways that you don't want to be over aggressive with necessarily, or, you know, wasteful with, you know, just blobbing into your opponent and so forth. I would love to see this unit as like a specialized offensive tool rather than the mainline infantry of the USF, which is traditionally the rifleman. Now, what's interesting is, we saw this in a clip before, is that the rifleman can be upgraded to the ranger and it doesn't lose veterancy. So once again, that's like another tempo / power spike type of interaction there. I like that you're losing the rifleman, so you can't just add in that ranger necessarily, but you're keeping the veterancy. So to me, man, that feels so strong. And I'm also curious, are you able to build this? Because I heard in the audio narration of the video that you can also build this from the barracks eventually. So yeah, I have to just wait to see to determine that. But yeah, Rangers are going to be strong, I think, especially against Wehrmacht. Okay, the medical tent, we're about to get into that. I really like this. I think it's going to be really good, especially with the ISC and the captain rally and so forth. But I think this behind buildings, you know, especially in team games, is going to be extremely useful for the USF.
Assault position. The medical tent is the intention behind it is that you want to be in the front lines longer with your infantry. So something that we noted was that the Americans had a hard time sometimes sustaining their army in the front lines. And specifically with the Rangers being as you're going to be outnumbered because of their cost, it's very useful to have this medical tent near your front lines so that you can retreat to and reinforce your infantry. And opposed to that, as an exclusive choice, you have designated assault position. Designated assault position is an ability that is meant for you to somewhat be able to close in on enemy positions. So you receive a defensive bonus on this large area. but you get your range reduced. And the intention there is that as the enemy playing against it, you have the counterplay to damage the units as they're coming in because they cannot
That's
fire
cool.
back at you.
That's cool.
But as the American player here, when you use this ability, you really want to position in kind of sort of ways that you can close in without getting too much damage. And once you're in close with this ability, the enemy will be heavily mismatched with your rangers or your riflemen when they come in. Something to point out was that
So
these
cool,
abilities
man.
here that are specifically on the ranger side of things, they can be used with the rangers, but also it was very intentional that can also be used with rifleman builds. So you can somewhat use these abilities, and even as we'll see just after this, it can even be used with the infantry assault. But yeah, moving one row down.
Okay, so before we get into open training, let's just talk about this design. So designate assault position is going to be a time duration, this period of time where you're going to have a zone where your units are faster, so you can close the gap from multiple flanks, as you can see on the screen there in the artwork, on an enemy position, but you have a reduced range. So you got to get up close and personal. You're going to be taking damage, as Miguel said. But the cool thing is the opposite battle group that's counteracting this offensive U.S. battle group is the Italian coastal, which this plays into, right? The Italian coastals are good on defense. U.S. advanced infantry is good on offense. So you have the clash of like hyper offensive and hyper defensive, and there's a trade-off here. Like Miguel said, designate assaulting position is not just a buff in itself. Your opponent has the ability to counterplay. And I think that's the real important thing about good design in any video game, strategy games, real-time strategy games in particular, is there's a counterplay. If your opponent is able to assess the situation quick enough, he has the option to counteract the ability, right? He's not nullifying the ability, but in terms of positional responses, he can counteract it. And I think that's awesome because it's going to force an interplay between both sides, which is really cool to see that level of interaction and tactical depth being introduced to the game. Now, weapon training, let's go ahead and jump in and see what that's all about.
Sorry, just to clarify, does assault position work with your allies or just your units?
Just your units.
Okay.
Yeah. Moving one row down, we have weapon training on the left side. This is something that the battle group somewhat went through various iterations, but the weapon training is this cool way that you can make your rangers even better at using the weapons that they acquire through the weapon crates. What basically does, it gives some effects to the weapons themselves. So, for example, the flamethrower would slow down enemy units. Some other weapons get some close range suppression. The bazookas, for example, when they fire at a target, they reduce the rate of fire. So there are some very cool effects that you can get through your rangers, and this is for people that really want to just go full in on the rangers. Like, let's say that you really got the type of ranger that you wanted with the right weapons.
I feel like that's the way to go.
Probably want to pick this to just make them even better. And competing with that, we have infantry assault. Infantry assault on its own is also a very strong ability, and the decision here between the two of them is, I think, very interesting because you want both as the ranger player, because with rangers you'll have a lack of units, and infantry assault provides you that amount of units for you to make the assault. So basically the meat shield for your rangers to kind of get up and close and do all the damage. So what the ability does, it calls in 3 rifleman squads and 2 bazooka squads to a target location, and they do basically an attack move order to the location. Once they meet the first enemy or they get to the position, there is a timer that starts. And after the timer ends, the units retreat. And also these units are not controllable by the player.
Right.
So the full intention here is that if you want to attack an enemy position, you'll use this and somewhat follow the assault of the infantry with your own infantry. And hopefully that means that most of the casualties will be of these like infantries that are not controllable by the player, and that you're spending munitions to call in. And again, like, the intention here is that if you're a ranger player, you'll probably be having a lack of units to kind of assault the position just because they are so costly. So this really provides a good way to be able to attack the enemy. I should also mention that there is a little bit of counterplay to the enemy. So, for example, you can try and just get away from the position, or you can use, for example, designate Overwatch, and they're really susceptible to, because they will not move out of the area, right? So they're really susceptible to artilleries or grenades or any sort of area of effectability that the enemy has.
Right. I imagine machine guns are a pretty good counter as
Yes.
well. Yeah.
So you also need to be a little bit smart on how you call these or when you call them, because you can just run them into HMG fire.
Yeah,
Super
I've
interesting.
definitely, on occasion, just fed a lot of experience to my enemy because I wasn't paying attention to how I use this. Amazing. Yeah, Rangers just sound like ultimate
strongest unit in the game.
Terminators. And I think there's going to be some very fun clips going around once people get their hands on that. Okay, let's look at the right hand.
Okay, so real quick, just right off the bat, when you look at this battle group, the Rangers, I feel like, are the central focus, especially for starting off. I would imagine you really want to play around the Ranger. So I feel like weapon training is the go-to over infantry assault, just in terms of value and scalability of the unit throughout the game, really improving that efficiency and cost. So I feel like if you're centralizing your strategy around the Rangers, weapon training is the way to go. Medical tent and designated assault position both seem very good. I feel like medical tent is what I'll be going for, but both are really cool and interesting. Now, infantry assault, I love in terms of a new mechanic to the franchise. Now, we've always had call-ins from Co-1, but this is the first time we're getting a call-in that is going to be a mix of riflemen and bazooka squads that are not controllable, right, by the player. You're calling them into assault a position, kind of like an AI call-in, and they can be suppressed. They give your opponent veterancy experience. So you have to be very careful on how you use this. Now, the thing about this ability is, if it's a manpower cost, it's not good in my opinion, because what's the point of spending, let's say, 300 manpower on this when you could just spend 300 manpower on a Ranger or a unit that's permanent, right? So I don't see the long-term use of that in that way. Now, if it's a munition cost, which I assume it is, I assume it's a munition cost because it's a time duration based AI call-in. It's very interesting in terms of not only tempo, a period of time where you have an overwhelming force, an army that you can leverage against your opponent, right? So you have this big swing of momentum, let's say, and you're able to really push a pace on your opponent, put them on the back foot, take territory, take ground, but also relocate your opponent's army by designating this infantry assault in one location strategically. That's very important. Your opponent is forced to react to it for whatever reason, and then now you can attack him with your main flank or your main thrust elsewhere. So it's really interesting because it once again forces this counterplay by your opponent. And once again, you see the offensive and defensive themes from both battle groups. So really, really love this ability. I hope to see more of this. And I really do hope that it's a munition-based ability that's not like overly expensive. But yeah, really interesting. But let's go ahead and see what's in store for this right side of the tech tree.
Hand side of the tree.
Yeah, so here on the right-hand side, we have the artillery observers. The theme that we wanted to go with these is that this right tree is heavily artillery based. So we wanted a unit that could spot for the artillery and somewhat play around with it. So the artillery observers is an upgrade to your scout unit. It gives them an extra soldier, like the Pathfinders. And their weapon profile is pretty similar to Pathfinders as well. But the special thing about the artillery observers is that they can build radio beacons. And radio beacons are these structures that around a 50 radius from them, they call artillery shots on enemy units.
Automatically?
And they are also camouflaged. So the intention there is that you can hide these behind enemy lines, and you play this sort of cat and mouse game with the enemy where they're trying to look where the radio beacon is.
Whoa.
I find that part really amusing.
That is
but
really
they're,
cool.
but they're not like
I didn't
totally
know
invisible. Like once you're close enough, you should be able to see them, right? Yeah.
You'll be able to spot them.
That's a fascinating
The other thing that
mechanic.
they can do is that they can actually monitor the radio beacons, and that basically amplifies the power of the radio beacons.
Dude, wow.
And the intention there is that if you kind of sacrifice this unit to, you could be capturing, you could do engagements with them, but you're sacrificing the unit to monitor the beacon. It basically amplifies the power of the beacon, and it's sort of a way to become its own sort of indirect fire unit. So the artillery comes in more frequently. It also increases the range, and it's also meant for you to use these even to target team weapons from the enemy. And specifically when you play against Coastal, you'll notice that it is fairly useful when the enemy is entrenched and you want to be able to get to them.
Wow, this unit
what
and the
about ammunition
officer are my
storage?
favorite units so far.
So the ammunition storage is meant to be played with team weapons and emplacements, even though it affects vehicles and infantry. The intention here, or first I should say what it actually does. So it enhances the rate of fire among other things like the ability to recharge of things around it. And this is very useful, especially for team games, because you can place these around your mortars, your howitzer. You can even use this for AT guns. So basically around this area, your units are just that much more powerful.
I think that's
It also
really
has
strong.
the con that it can blow up, and it's also fairly easy to destroy the building, so you need to be careful on how you position it. But the intention here is that if you don't want to go to the artillery observers, which kind of give you that power right away, you can go for the ammunition storage and then pair that up with the howitzer, and especially later
Yeah.
on with the auto fire.
I feel like that's a really reliable way to use it.
If you are like a 3v3 or a 4v4 player, this is a very, very useful choice to have.
Because the howitzer has the long
let's
range.
talk about the big gun.
You're out of reach of the mortars and so forth.
So this one is alongside the Rangers, it's the highlight of the battle group. So this is a unit that the Americans were missing. It's an artillery piece.
For sure.
Which is a 105 millimeter howitzer. It's a medium artillery. It's really good at destroying emplacements from the enemy, and obviously at causing infantry damage in general. When paired up with the ammunition storage, it becomes even stronger. So you can fully spec into these howitzers, and they are meant to be kind of your solution to heavily entrenched enemy play.
Okay, and it looks like the last couple abilities in our tree specifically buff the howitzer.
Yeah. Well,
Sorry, one's a call in and the other one buffs it.
Yeah. So I'll start with the one that actually buffs it. The auto fire is definitely on paper a very strong ability, but it has a very big risk attached to it, and this is something
What's
that's
the
very
risk?
intentional.
Yeah, it's going to select random
in
units.
the previous games or emplacements, and even for the most part in our game, they are on a cooldown. They have a barrage ability that they can use. But this basically enables the howitzer to function as sort of a team weapon, in that they can just fire naturally without using the ability.
Okay.
But it has a really big drawback that the range of it is not very big. It's more or less the range of one of your normal team weapons, like a LEIG.
That's still a lot of
what
range.
that basically means is that
Defensive?
you need to already be building your howitzers with that in mind, because they need to be close to the front line. And by the nature of being close to the front line, they're also really at risk of being destroyed. They're not in a safe position.
Right.
But the trade-off of that is that you get this constant barraging of the enemy position for free, because you're not using the barrage, right? So there's this interesting dynamic that we're going for here that I'm really interested to see how it shapes out in team games specifically.
And I imagine the ammunition storage and the auto fire kind of worked in tandem.
Yes, they would.
Yeah.
And on the other side of it is the 155 millimeter rapid artillery. This is the first time that the Americans have access to an off-map artillery ability, and this is a very strong ability. It comes down really fast, and it clears up somewhat any defensive play that the enemy has. And it's also very intentional that this is a competing choice with the auto fire, because it could be that you don't have your howitzers built, or you weren't able to build them closer to the front line, or even if you're like in a smaller game mode like a 1v1, it's still very useful to have these. And the intention here is that you get to have this like heavy ammunition sink ability that you don't need to do the pre-preparation of doing the howitzer emplacements, and you can just use it one-off and be able to break through an enemy position at that time. It's obviously a more concentrated fire than a usual howitzer barrage, comes down faster, so very useful to just do that one time to win that engagement that you really need.
I think the rapid artillery is better than the auto
yeah,
fire.
it looks scary. I mean,
feel like-
I said the same thing about the Italian coastal, but this battle group also looks very, very scary to me.
Yeah.
If you're going to be going up against them.
really
Let's switch
good.
over to some gameplay where we can see these battle groups in action before I ask my next question here. So Darren, I'll throw this question to you again. I'm kind of curious what your big takeaway
there's the
is
command
for
bunker.
the U.S. Forces Advanced Infantry.
Regular
Like,
bunker.
what are your high level thoughts about that battle group?
The graphics
So
look
the
so
high
good,
level
man.
thoughts on the battle
I love
group
it.
is, at least in the team game sense, it's going to give USF something they generally lack, which is just playing the long range artillery game. Generally, they have to play up close and shorter, or they need to go with units like the whiz bang, and that's still a shorter range artillery piece. It's very good, it's very powerful,
Bunkers
but
look
it's not
really
the
cool.
same as just the ability to sit back and slowly whittle the enemy away with attrition. But also the American infantry is also very much a battle group based around very expensive units. They're very good, but there's also clear counters to defeating, like, if you
very
can push off the
forward.
one ranger squad, generally you're in a much better position than the US player is going to be, because at the high level, that battle group, if you're going rangers, most of the munitions and upgrades are going to be going into those ranger squads.
So here we're watching some footage. I believe this is Jose in the purple and Darren, you in the red, versus Miguel in the teal and Marco in the blue. And Axis are both using Italian coastal, and allies are both using advanced infantry. So I'm very kind of curious when we look at these battle groups and we compare them to the existing ones for their factions. How do they kind of stack up? How do they compare to the existing battle groups? Let's maybe start with the U.S. forces. Miguel, what are your thoughts there?
So the U.S. Advanced Infantry is supposed to be this battle group that scales well into the late games, more specifically because of their artillery. And that is a big difference maker, because if we look at the other American battle groups, they usually are pretty good at playing basically the medium game. And for the late game, we have the armored. But this is the first battle group that we have that is somewhat supposed to play well into the later stages of the game.
Oh, wow.
But
I wasn't
based off
expecting
of
that.
infantry gameplay. And that is the big difference here. It's also the first battle group comparatively to any of the other ones that offers somewhat of a stable solution to the indirect fire. So obviously, as Darren mentioned, we have the whiz bang, but it doesn't really compare or fill the same role as the howitzer here.
I agree.
But more specifically as well, we wanted this battle group to feel very unique in the way it plays with infantry. So no other battle group plays as well with kind of infantry gameplay as this one. The abilities are fully geared towards your rifleman gameplay and enhancing that overall gameplay loop. Whereas the other battle groups usually they focus on either like one elite unit like the paratroopers or some like vehicle gameplay like the armored. So this fits into its very own category of what it's supposed to accomplish. We're really looking for enhanced infantry gameplay here, and looking into this indirect sort of fire approach that the US were lacking.
Yeah, I think this is a clear example of what you were doing in this match here, where you have the ammunition storage plus 2 howitzers plus 2 mortars,
Yes.
trying to hammer these defenses here. So same question for you, Darren. I'm kind of curious, how does the Italian coastal kind of stack up to the existing Wehrmacht battle groups?
Compared to the other Wehrmacht battle groups and pretty much to every other battle group in the game, Coastal is based around, as I said earlier, on those defenses. It is based around those bunkers and your coastal reserve units. So where most of the Wehrmacht generally offer some more like mid to late game units, or like heavy power. This one is primarily he bases its power on, and those units are like elite infantry and vehicles for those battle groups. Oops, or like air power or from Luftwaffe. This one's very much based on its defenses, the infantry and the artillery, but in particular for this battle group, it is going to be more reliant on the bunkers than any other battle group. That, as I've mentioned, you need to build your bunkers, you need to do the setup of those bunkers, and all your units that come from the right side of the tree either have abilities to influence the bunker, are influenced by bunkers, or have the ability to also set them up faster. And on top of that,
Wow, that's really good.
and in terms of the battle group's defensive play, it's not just a battle group where you can just sit back. However, like, sure, you can make a lot of line of bunkers, but you do need to push at some point, and that's where the bunker abilities come in. Like, you build forward bunkers and use those as like staging points for your assault. Or you use the things like the artillery officer or the Obiche as your main pushing tools for this battle group, because
Sherman looks a lot
this
more
battle
responsive
group,
too.
while you will probably still incorporate things like the advanced infantry from Wehrmacht's tier
The
2 and tier
reverse in
3,
particular.
a lot of your fighting is going to be done by the coastal reserves and the coastal officers, as they're going to be more key components of this army composition, where for Wehrmacht, traditionally your grenadiers begin to roll off past the early game.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of players speculate that the coastal reserves are just Austrupen 2.0. Is that the case, or do you think there are some key
Feels like
differences?
it.
There are a
to be
few
honest.
key differences. Is one,
More
and
utility.
this will probably actually surprise you. Like, our coastal reserves are actually better combatants than the grenadier squad when they're fighting from cover. They will actually beat units unlike
So,
unupgraded
even more
riflemen if the
defensive,
riflemen
but
just
better.
decide to rush into them.
It's good.
On top of that, coastal reserves are even cheaper, and the ability to get your free reinforcement off the bunker means they excel at those attritional fights. And on top of that, their veterancy at level 2 does give them that 7th man.
Okay.
So it does give you those like larger, more durable squads for attritional fighting.
I like that.
And for screening your units.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
And
So-
it should be noted, I don't think it was ever mentioned in any videos, the coastal reserves can still support you because they still have access to anti-tank grenades to stop vehicles from rushing down your team weapons or bunkers.
right.
It's important. It's an important note.
Following up, sort of in that same vein, Miguel, I'm kind of curious, like, what you consider some of
howitzer.
the biggest strengths of the advanced infantry to be.
So
I mean, I'm just kind of watching it right here, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
yeah, so on the right side of the tree where we provide all the artillery choices, that's one of the really big strengths that we went for, and I think that we really hit. So the Americans now have access to a really efficient artillery piece. So that's strength number one. Strength number two, though, which obviously is the most awesome one, are the Rangers. So the
Yeah,
Rangers,
they look really good.
you need to be careful on how you play with them, because obviously they will absolutely tank your economy if you use them the wrong way. But
So it sounds like they're
on the other
expensive.
side of things, if you do get them to the late game stages and you get the right weapons on them,
Which is good.
that is like a really big strength that you'll have, because this squad will absolutely do the work for you. So that is like the big strength, I would say. But
Better
there
be
is
expensive,
one
man.
more that I really enjoy using, which I'm not sure that we'll see in the video, but the assault infantry, I think, really provides the American player with a way to kind of attrition the opponent through like these infantry columns.
How much more
Um,
responsive the
which
vehicles look. That's so
In
sick.
team games can be a challenge
So
sometimes
good to
of the
see.
Americans to somewhat win the attrition wars. So this battle group with these abilities somewhat offers a way to kind of go toe to toe with the Wehrmacht or the DAC player a little bit better with these infantry columns. So yeah, I would put those as the three main strengths. There's also it's a strength, but also minor one compared to the other ones, which is the artillery scout. So with that one, it's about somewhat whittling down your opponent with those radio beacons. And that really offers them a way to also scout the opponents a little bit better, because the beacon will target things in the fog of war. and that is something that the Americans can sometimes struggle with, is fitting that scouting into their builds. Specifically because you can pair up these artillery observers with your rifleman builds. So then it becomes really useful for you to have like a unit that's actually combat effective, but also can provide you with some indirect fire for the team weapons for your riflemen to then go in.
What about you, Darren? What do you think are some of the core strengths of the Italian coastal battle group for the Wehrmacht?
For the Italian coastal, it's going to be a mix of the ability to rapidly build those defenses is on the field, and the big thing is if you can get your coastal setup up and running, and it does provide you like very strong and safe fallback points that you can go back to replenish and repair, or where other armies might need to retreat back to base, or like if you break through their front line, there's nothing really to support you in the second line. Where here, if like, let's say I have like a front line of team weapons and infantry holding out, but if I get enemy pushes through, they might run into a bunch of mines I've set up thanks to cheaper mines from the coastal wall, or they could run into obstacles like the anti-tank bunker, or they could be, or I could end up just falling back to like my designate defense line point for those increased buffs to make my infantry very hard to kill, or on top of that, like call to reserves or designate artillery overwatch all provide me with things as like emergency abilities to like hold the line and essentially push the enemy back if they start either pushing the front or pushing into like your second defensive line.
That's been pretty interesting to see the infantry assault paired up with the designate overwatch from coastal.
Yeah. just nothing but carnage.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's maybe we've talked a lot about like the really awesome things that these battle groups can do. So I'm kind of curious, how do players counter them if they come up against them in a match? Let's again start with U.S. forces. Miguel, how do people counter everything in that battle group?
Yeah, so the big thing that you would need to
big
counter is the Rangers here. And the way that you want to go about countering the Rangers is because they're pretty expensive units. You want to either outnumber them or be able to pick units like the heavy machine guns that usually are pretty efficient in terms of cost for what they do to an infantry unit. And just basically whittle down the American player. And not only that, the American player will be very susceptible to vehicle gameplay. So with Rangers, you can obviously drop the weapon crates which have bazookas in them, but you're not guaranteed to get a bazooka. And also, depending on the time of the match, you'll maybe have access to one bazooka, for instance.
I see.
So they're really susceptible to, if you use them in the wrong way, to basically destroy your own economy, because they're really expensive to reinforce. But they're also really susceptible to vehicle gameplay.
Okay, so Darren, same question, but for the Italian coastal, what are the big counters to all those bunkers and everything else that they can do on the battlefield?
So do not fear, this is not the Sim City from Company of Heroes 2 or Company of Heroes 1. So like one of the biggest counters to the coastal player is forcing them to come out and fight you from that bunker line. So this involves units like mortars, or pack howitzers, like any sort of indirect. The coastal player, at least in the early game, is not going to be able to generally counter unless he gets its own indirect or he starts pushing the line. So that forces the coastal player to come out from the safety of their bunkers where they are weakest, just on the field. And force an engagement with the coastal units. And then if you can manage to beat them back, you can then start pushing into the bunkers and start clearing them without having to worry about the rest of the enemy's army on the field. But also things that can crack bunkers like anti-tank guns, vehicles that manage to get around the anti-tank bunker, satchel charges, just anything that's able to just quickly bring down the bunker, you can still use. Though obviously with some of the abilities in the battle group, it's more dangerous to get close with the bunkers.
Right.
But yeah, against the battle group, any sort of indirect fire is going to be useful for forcing the coastal player to at least react in some way. You might not kill his bunkers fast or quickly, but he's not really going to have, at least until the late game, the ability to counter fire or counter battery that artillery.
Really
So I'm
interesting.
kind of curious, what sort of strategies do we envision players using for like the advanced infantry, Miguel? Like how do you think players are going to utilize them in their matches or in their comp stomps?
Yeah, there are a few ways I can see people using them.
Oh, before
Let's
before
see,
we
infantry
touch on that,
assault.
here's the great example of the
They're all dying.
yeah.
The officer.
Still
Yeah.
really cool.
But you did use obviously the infantry call in with the buff, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Artillery looks so good too.
Unfortunately, I think Darren here countered you pretty hard.
Fortunately, the artillery shells don't care about the bonuses you get.
Yeah. Sorry. So strategies for players with the advanced infantry.
Yeah, so there is the first strategy, which I really like using, which is pairing up the artillery observers with your own rifleman builds. And you somewhat cover that scouting aspect, plus some of the counter to the team weapons that the rifleman might struggle to counter. And not only that, you can support your rifleman with a unit that is not too bad in combat. So that's one of the ways I see it. Also, then eventually into the later stages, you can transition into the howitzers. Another way I see it, and this is specifically more for team games, and it's kind of what I did here in this game, is you can go for the ammunition storage, which it can be a little bit weaker in the early game until you start getting all the emplacements and the team weapons to kind of make use of the ammunition storage. But it pays off in the long run, and I think it will be pretty useful in the 3v3 and 4v4 kind of team game modes,
sure.
where you have the time to do that. So you can go ammunition storage, and you can strategize around just the ammunition storages and just like build mortars, build emplacements, and play around that. The other way is through the Rangers. And here through the Rangers, you have many options. And the reason why that is because the weapon crates don't guarantee you weapons. So that basically means that depending on your first or second weapon crate, your strategy can change heavily. So I can see people going Rangers and trying to support them with then eventually like a WSC, so the Weapon Support Center, to fill that gap if they don't get the bazookas. I can also see the Rangers being paired up with riflemen and BARs. That gives them a really strong anti-infantry
Major
offering.
blob by the infantry assault AI.
And
That's
then
hilarious.
there's the last bit, which would be your usual rifleman builds, but with the usage of these abilities that the battle group offers you to kind of enhance that gameplay even further. So yeah, definitely lots of ways I think you can play the infantry battle group, which I think kind of hits the point that these battle groups are a lot more replayable than the other battle groups that we had at launch, which should make these like somewhat almost two battle groups in one in terms of just the amount of things you can do with them.
Yeah.
I feel like that as well. These are very
Darren, what
complex
about strategies
battle groups.
players
of
might be able to
options.
utilize with the Italian coastal?
For the Italian coastal, at least in the smaller team games, you'll probably be more gravitating to like going down, at least getting your coastal reserves and probably the big unit you want in the battle group early on. And he is readily available is that officer because he does offer that ability to zone an area with artillery. So he pretty much forces people to not take favorable engagements in cover or forces them out of cover or giving you an advantage or at least moving the position, forcing the position into your fight. But also there are a few abilities like you probably also wanting to grab like designate defense line as well. Oh, just because of that access to more early
big
healing
shot.
and that defensive boost that you can get nearby. The coastal reserves you're almost always going to have available because they're available from the start of the game and you can get quick access to them. As for when you might decide to put down your bunker, that for your first bunker in the small games, that will be your big decision in point because while the bunkers are going to be cheaper, it's still a decision to use those resources to put that bunker down for your coastal reserve and you're likely deciding that is going to be a location that's either your defense line or where you're going to be fighting from that point of the game.
Right.
In the larger team games, it's going to be much easier for players to fortify because you're not going to be forced into as big mobile war or like running your squads to capture multiple points. You're going to be primarily focusing on your lane, and this is where our coastal is particularly going to shine because you're going to have that ability to at least set up your defenses into the direction of where the enemy is coming. And so you can act as like a very heavy anchor on certain points of a line and team game.
Yeah.
And on top of that, you're not just situated to defense into the late game. You do have the Obiche for artillery. You do have that heavy artillery to pressure enemy team weapons or counterfire their artillery, break their defenses. Or even like in emergencies, fire it at point blank range at enemies who are trying to attack your line.
Yeah.
And because you're able to have that big anchor in the team games or the position, those abilities on like the heavy fortifications where the bunker actives are likely going to shine in those modes in particularly.
Yeah. So we just saw an example there of the artillery call in, and I think the Allies might have this game wrapped up. So let's maybe switch back to our guests here. So final question as we wrap this discussion up. For each of you, I'm kind of curious, what is your favorite part of these battle groups, and maybe what are you excited for players to see or experience once they can play with them? Darren, let's start with you.
In the coastal battle group, my favorite thing is probably the artillery officer. I spent a lot of time working on.
I think so too.
On that unit, and I
love the unit.
It's pretty much the first time we've made an officer unit in Company of Heroes that really feels like a support officer unit.
Right.
Most of our officers, even the U.S. captain in Company of Heroes 3, feel more like combat units that are supposed to be on the front line supporting, where the coastal officer is very much supposed to be in the back. He's not there to provide like raw damage from his base firearms or anything.
Right.
He's very much there to like stay back there and drop artillery on a target position as his primary way of dealing damage. And I don't think any of our other infantry really does that.
Great job,
what
Darren.
about you, Miguel? Well, what's your favorite part of these battle groups?
Great job, Darren. And I could see how passionate he is behind that. Such a good job on the design. I haven't played with the unit yet, but it's probably my favorite unit as well. It reminds me of a lot of different, ideas and mechanics from other strategy games. But yeah, great job on that. And I hope to see more of that in the future. It's a very high skill unit, a very dynamic unit, and it really helps reinforce the build order side of the game as well, which they've been really trying to improve compared to Code 1 and Code 2.
Groups and what are you excited for players to play with?
That is a tough question. I think the assault infantry ability is probably the highlight for me. It just creates so many
Interesting.
Great moments in the game.
It could be really good.
As a close second, I'll throw in like the Rangers with the way you can spec into them, and also the artillery observers. Just if you go for the radio beacons, having your opponent trying to find out where they are is I find like a really fun gameplay loop.
Awesome.
I find the artillery observers
I think that's
going to
wrap up our overview of these new battle groups coming in the Hammer and Shield pack. Again, I mentioned it earlier, but you can also unlock the new battle groups with merit via the in-game store. But for now, thank you very much, Miguel. Thank you, Darren. And I'm hoping that players appreciate all the work that you put into these new battle groups.
Absolutely, man. Great work.
So we will say goodbye and head over to the next segment. Thanks so much.
Bye, everyone.
See ya.
Loiter changes. So before, even though it was in the circle, it would continue to chase this unit. Even though it's out of the blue circle, it would still be firing at it. You're gonna see probably another strafe here, I'm assuming. Yeah, okay, see? It shouldn't continue attacking outside of the circle. So here, you may have one initial strafe on it. Yeah, okay. So you have one initial strafe because it was in the circle. But there's not going to be that continual pursuit and damage if you get out of the circle, right? That's
All
the
right, now we're
counterplay.
back with Marco Fiore. I just love saying your name that way. Marco, you are here to show us the new replay system. But first, can you tell us who you are, what do you do on the team, and maybe some of your history, not just with Co, but with the replay system in general?
Sure. Hey everyone, Marco here. You probably might know me as Marcus239. My history with Company of Heroes actually begins in the very far 2006 with the first chapter of the game that I actually found in a local store. And the first thing that impressed me was the stunning details of the units on the box, the explosions, and the promises of a fully destructible environment, and the cinematic World War II campaign that really hooked me up. Throughout the years, this passion kind of evolved, and my involvement evolved over time to the point where in 2008, I actually joined communities about Company of Heroes, starting as a replay reviewer and then writing strategy guides. And when Co2 launched in 2013, I contributed on designing and pitching the current observer mode for Co2, which was shipped by Relic in November 2014. It's been quite a long journey since then, and we have done so many tournaments in the meantime. And I just want to point out that one of the most amazing things on working on replays on Co3 has been that I was able to do it alongside the same artist that made the community pitch of Co2 turn into reality, turn into the observer mode of Co2. It was really great to be able to relive some of those moments.
So it sounds like you have quite a bit of history working with the team to watch matches back. So Marco, we know that replays have obviously been a really hotly requested feature by players. Can you let me know what has, before we actually jump in and take a look at it, can you let me know what has gone into this new system? You know, what were some of our goals with this incarnation of the replay system, and how did we want to set it apart from the systems in previous games?
Sure. So as a general goal, what we wanted to build was a tool that felt modern, easy to use, and capable of serving multiple audiences and user segments. So we didn't want to build something just for one type of player. We wanted to include competitive players, content creators, players that are just there looking to improve, or even players that don't really want to engage with the game directly, but they like watching when matches are being showcased on live stream services. This means that players will find a varied and flexible set of features that will cater to different audiences.
It's really important.
An example of that could be that, for example, some features like live match stats, production queue, kill counter are more catered towards competitive players and content creators, while things like tactical pose might be more interesting for players that want to improve. Mm-hmm. And when we actually started working on this feature, we looked at a lot of different products. We look at what currently is on the market, the previous implementations since Company of Heroes 1, and even games like Age of Empires and other RTS games. We know that players really want something powerful and not just a simple playback UI. And we will also wanted to do this the right way. So when looking back at what Co2 offers, I'm pleased to say that we will offer pretty much the same functionalities that players are used to see from Company of Heroes 2, alongside with some brand new things and quality of life improvements that we will go through very shortly, in a very few minutes. So what we're going to explore here will be the entry point of replays, which is our replay list, how replays look like in-game, so specifically the caster HUD and the playback panel with all the related features, and what is the user experience of saving a replay, which happens in the post-game stats.
Okay, amazing. So I feel like now is the time where we should maybe go through a bit of a live demonstration for this. So, Marco, I've fired up Company of Heroes. I want to look at replays. What do I do now?
Okay, so with Company of Heroes 3 open, you will notice immediately that we have a replays button here in the main menu. By clicking on that, we would open the replay list, which offers both a high-level overview of each replay files that you have saved, alongside with more detailed information on the right side of the screen. So if we start going a little bit into details, we have a search functionality here on the top right to help players finding matches that they are looking for. In terms of information, we display the name of replays, the map on which the game has been played, the type of the game. Is it a custom game? Is it a quick match, co-op versus AI? The match size, and when the replay has been recorded.
Right, and I imagine if we had quite a number of replays in our system, this list would be a lot longer.
Exactly, and you would be able to scroll that. Okay. So for the purpose of this example, we only have one replay. The interesting part is that we this time we are also going to showcase replays that are no longer available due to a patch update. So players will see outdated games directly in-game, and they would be able to use the delete feature to delete one of them if they want to.
I like that.
So speaking of features, we are also bringing the delete and rename functionality to change replay's name, which is pretty good. I know that like players in Code 2 have been wanting to be able to rename replays for a very long time. And alongside that, we also have this replay list is auto-updating live. So whether you are deleting or renaming files, or you're acting in your documents folder by adding new games, they will be immediately available in-game. You don't have to do any other further action. Players that played Code 2 know well that you would need to do some shenanigans to make this work.
Yeah, so I no longer have to go digging into my playback folder in Windows Explorer. Okay.
In terms of like more detailed information, we do display the minimap and all the match information, the standard ones like game mode, starting location, etc. And we are displaying also the team composition with all the battle groups and the faction, with the ability to go through the players and eventually like add them as friend, check their profile, report them. All these like social features also available in other places of the game. On top of that, we are also adding some very nice quality of life improvements in the form of like we are automatically saving up to 10 replays for you. You don't have to save them manually. This is very helpful in case you play a great game, but then you forget to save the game and then you play another one. Or in cases we have like a tournament, we don't have to worry about players forgetting to save the replays, because we will do that for you pretty much.
Right, because in the older games, if you played a match immediately after, it would wipe your previous replay.
Exactly.
You didn't manually save it. Okay.
Exactly. And so I guess at this point, this covers pretty much like what we offer in the replay list. So shall we go in this game?
Let's do it. Let's watch it.
Okay. So
I really hope you're going to be able to load a replay right after.
To mention the improvements on the loading screen. We have added the map name, the minimap, and we also have these very nice backgrounds. The loading was pretty quick.
I like the new loading screen as well.
We have the whole replay feature.
Wow, look at that,
so
man. This is going to be so good for the whole community at large.
The caster HUD, this item up here. So caster HUD is by default on for replays. It is the main tool we want to propose players to follow two players that played the match. The person that recorded the game will be the one displayed on the top left and will be the one looking as blue, and this team will be the blue team. You will be able to choose which player you want to get information on for the caster part for both the teams. And let's look at the amount of informations we display. This tool only allows to check one player at a time, so per team. So in terms of information, we're trying to compare as many information as we can. So we have all the resource layout for both the players, so you can know if any of the player is banking some more resources.
Yep.
You have the information of which battle group has been picked, how many command points, and which battle group abilities have been picked. We can see, for example, from Darren here that he has picked the Italian coastal battle group and he's gotten the coastal reserves. And then we have the double GAC. So GAC stands for Global Unit Control. It allows you to understand the army size of both the players at any time in the game. Then we have the production queue. Let's see if swapping player, maybe we have something displayed.
I love the UI, man. Like the worn out UI.
Not for now, but
really
No one's
thematic.
building anything.
no one is building anything.
Feels like a
But
World War
basically
II
on the
like machine
top,
you're operating.
left and top right, we will display production buildings being built and production building upgrades and some assets. Like, for example, we're displaying sandbags being built.
Very cool. I also see a very interesting counter in the middle, just above the
Yes.
time. What is that?
So this is the kill counter. We thought that one of the very interesting metrics that we could display in Company of Heroes 3 would be how many units you and your opponent have killed. And you can compare this for any player. The very cool part is that these are, we define them as player elements. So if you're using, since replays are compatible with any color scheme, whether you use unique color schemes or team color schemes, when you use unique, these bars will be colored with the player unique color.
That's awesome. It's a very
In
basic
terms
but
of,
really nice feature.
And so we will display infantry and team weapons in the enemy infantry killed and vehicles in the enemy vehicles killed. You will see, like, as the game progresses, maybe we can jump to Miguel, as I feel something is going to happen soon. You will quickly see that these bars get filled with colors.
Okay.
Okay, and that's it in terms of the caster mode. There is more that I will mention when we go to the playback panel, because we wanted to make this feature pretty usable for different user types. But I guess we could move to the playback panel.
Okay, sounds good.
So,
So
Is he gonna
I guess
drop
before
this?
we get too far into the playback panel, I know one of the things that players have been requesting the ability for our replays to do is to rewind them, and they've been requesting that for some time. And up until now, Marco, I know our team has been very cagey about saying why we don't do that. Well, I spoke to one of our principal programmers and the head of technology for all of Relic Entertainment, because I wanted to get some answers for our players. And Marco, I think I'm just gonna read their answer out in its entirety, because it's
Absolutely.
it's fairly technical, and I want to make sure I'm quoting them properly. So feel free to click around in the match, because this might take a while. So
follow the match.
buckle up, folks. It's a bit
going to
of
be
a
a
long
big
answer. So,
explanation or what?
here we go. Company of Heroes 3 uses a deterministic networking model to get so many highly complex units running full AI synchronized across the network. Our app pushes well over a gig per second of deltas. This is one of the big differences between real-time strategy games and other genres. It is also the reason Relic games can be particularly demanding of the CPU and memory. The usual way to implement a replay system is to store the world state every frame and just play that back. However, because our world state is so large, we are generating up to a terabyte of data for one Company of Heroes match. Just some really fast math. 1 gigabyte per second times 1,000 seconds. If our match is 17 minutes long, that already gets us to 1 terabyte.
Sounds
This
like
is
a lot.
impractical to transfer over the network or save to a local disk, and is the reason we instead handle both networking and replays by transferring or saving player commands and having the client execute these commands locally. This deterministically arrives at the same state of the world as other clients playing the same match or viewing the same replay. When we run a replay, we are literally recreating the game, and the state of the world is locally maintained from one frame to the next. We fast forward by simulating faster, or as fast as your computer can manage. The game cannot go backwards in time, so neither can our replays. Going backward requires restoring previous states, which goes back to the problem of massive storage and long saving and loading times.
Oh, that's a bummer.
So until the game can do things like unexplode a building. What about potential solutions? I know a lot of players have suggested certain things that we could try. And truthfully, we've thought a lot about them, but none of them are practical right now, and we have to make hard decisions about this. It is possible to write a game engine that can reverse time, but we must conscientiously build that tech stack from the ground up. And like all things in video games, it comes with a trade-off. In this case, it would be the complexity of the experience. Alternatively, we could take periodic snapshots of the world state while the game plays forward the first time, and then restore the closest snapshot upon rewind. But as long as we push large amounts of data, the snapshots would present as FPS hitches during the replay, and the rewind would incur like a full game reload, which is impractically long. At the end of the day, it comes down to the amount of data, which would require a deep investment to optimize and compress. Cheaper solutions would compromise the experience that we want our players to enjoy. One example is to reduce our unit counts or the complexity of our unit AI and the world simulation, but these are essentials for the Company of Heroes experience, and we wouldn't want to do that. Those are just some obstacles highlighting the nuances around what seems like a, quote, simple problem. Ugh,
Interesting. Wow. Not a huge deal, in my opinion.
Yeah, in the end, my big takeaway is that it turns out that making video games can be just as hard as reversing time.
It is.
But yes, you were going to talk about playback panel. So let's cover that now.
All right. So in terms of playback panel, we do have the standard features that players would expect, like the ability to change speed pace. We can go all the way up to 8 times or even slow down all the way to 1/4, consistently with previous games. This time, though, as I was mentioning, we really want this feature to be interesting for different user segments. And so when it comes down to pausing the replay, we are adding tactical pause. So you will be able to see all the commands that are issued by each of the players at your own pace. And these would actually be a great learning tool, in my opinion, especially if you follow very good players like Miguel in this case. Then we actually wanted to make the tool usable and more interesting for different for tournament organizers. So one aspect that we explored was how do we make this how do we make a hard element that takes so much space also free up? How do we free up some space on other areas of the screen? And so we integrated this solution, which is this 3-state button that allows us to collapse the playback panel and then hide player elements. So ideally, when I go collapse, everything moves down, and you will no longer see all the information of the units and their abilities.
Looks really
but
good.
you will have way more gameplay space.
I like this a lot.
And if you wanted to cast game
casting
in a more in an environment where we don't really showcase the specific player faction abilities, we could go hide player elements. And in this third state, you will notice that the battle group abilities and the faction elements, as well as resources, will all disappear. And now you have as much of gameplay space as possible, which really opens up for if you're casting a game and your audience already knows the abilities and you just want to focus on the gameplay itself, you can do that.
Looks phenomenal.
This works well when you have in combination with the caster toggle, which we'll see in a second, because it will open up for a different set of combinations that might favor a user type or another. I personally really like going all the way down to hiding player elements when I'm if I want to cast a game. Then we have the match length, current match time and match length. We can select the player, so I want to clarify what is this behavior. As we built the replay system in a way that could also use the caster mode, we have 2 types of player selection. One is in the caster HUD itself, and it's basically which player do I want to get information on when I'm trying to that I want to check with another opponent. And the other one is actually which player in the replay am I selecting. So I will see his point of view, his fog of war, and that's like a different setting.
Okay, gotcha.
When it comes down to fog of war, we are opting for the classic functionalities, following just like revealing the map for the selected player and his team, or revealing the whole map, which opens up for just being able to see everything. At this point, if you reveal all, like you can collapse everything. So more features. So in terms of displaying the other stats of the game, there is a welcome back to the live match stats. That is something that we also had in Company of Heroes 2, which is basically a very similar version of the post-match stats, but they appear as an overlay that is
very
built
quick and
over
accessible
time
in-game.
and is updated live as we go through that, displaying the amount of resources, the points held, the army value,
in-game.
as well as the units and their performance. So
Fantastic.
these can be really good if you want to check how players are doing. And we opted for having a gradient background so that you can still follow the action happening in the back.
I do love seeing a live graph. That's exciting.
It is, yes, especially if you like math and numbers. So in terms of the cluster mode toggle, so as I was saying, we want to offer players a lot of flexibility. And this comes down to what kind of players you are. Perhaps not every player is interested into having the cluster HUD enabled. So in that case, let's say you want to have a more gameplay, similar to gameplay experience, you can toggle off the cluster mode and you would get the same HUD that you have in a normal match.
That's cool.
And
lot of
even
features.
in this case, what you can do is that you can again collapse the playback panel, and eventually you could even hide all the player elements in case you wanted to follow that.
Very
Of
minimalist.
course, not every combination is like the most optimal one. So I would recommend that if you want to just follow a single player, to keep these elements up. Then we have another feature, which is free camera. This is also another welcome back from Company of Heroes 2. And this allows us to basically say, oh, I don't want to manually move around the game. I want to follow players' perspective and see what they were doing and how they were moving the camera.
I like this one in particular.
We have done a lot of work into making this quite smooth. So you will see that in the final version of the game when it's released. And this should allow you to even go like hands off, just let the game go as if it was a movie.
That's
And this goes well with the next couple of options I wanted to bring, which are the cinematic mode and like another extra thing that you can do there. So I will enable again the cluster mode because I really, really love it. Meanwhile, we can see how the kill count is really shaping up to be in favor of Miguel. I had no doubt about that. So cinematic mode, what it does is it hides the rest of the HUD. And you can see that the button is still here. It's just like...
Just fades away.
Fades away, exactly. But we do still keep some of the UI elements visible, like the colors on the points, the health bars of the units. So this gives you a way, if in case you want to follow the most epic moments of a match, gives you a way to do that. And alternatively, if you want to experience the full, I want to be as if I want to experience this as if I was in a movie. Let me see if I remember the hotkey. It should be this. Okay, so you can go in full screenshot mode. This is an option already available in the game. It's
cool.
compatible with replays, and you can use this in combination with the free camera off to just experience the game as if it was a movie. So you don't even have to worry about anything. The game will just play itself and you will follow the specific player. I already tried this home and it looks pretty good when you want to like chill and just watch a game from a more cinematic perspective. And that should be. Oh no, it's actually not just that. We're almost at the end of this part, but we also have some other cool options. So we heard about players being interested into customizing hotkeys for replays, so we added that option as well. So if we
It's great for
open the
casters in
settings
particular.
and we go in the controls, you will see that you have a new replays tab that
This
allows
looks so
you
much
to
better.
customize the hotkeys for the most common and used features, like slowing and making the game slower or faster, toggling the fog of war, the free camera option, cinematic mode, or choosing another player to spectate. So once you know the hotkeys, you can basically just watch the game in full screenshot mode and just be switching from a player to the other without having to use your mouse.
Yeah, that's definitely handy. And obviously, a lot of the other existing hotkeys still function the way you
Yeah.
would expect, like tactical pause, still on
Yeah.
the spacebar. Yeah, okay.
Exactly. Yeah, we don't do any change. And that is it in terms of the replay, in-game replay feature itself. But there are a couple of extra topics I would want to mention that are not strictly related to replays.
Sure. It sounds like you're hinting about some of the other improvements that we have made to the game in general.
Yes.
Are you talking about maps?
I'm talking about maps. Yes. So specifically, I'm talking about the minimap and the tactical map. So this is basically a part of the game that we have really improved to the point that I'm really feeling like we could call it like a V2, especially of the tactical map.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to the minimap, you will notice that we have improved a lot of the visuals on the minimap. Like we have adopted. Oh, actually, we might have. Oh no, we are still here. So you will notice that on the minimap itself, we have improved the visual of the actual map that we're using, following a close to Kawan art style. We have improved the look of strategic points, so now they appear on the minimap.
Looks good.
But where we have really done some improvements is the tactical maps. I'm gonna open that for you guys. You will notice first thing,
Huge
tactical
difference.
map is big.
This is so awesome.
It is the biggest we could get it to. So we made it so that even when you like rotate the tactical map, it always is true to the maximum size it can be on your screen.
This is so nice.
We have also improved the visuals of the tactical map, in terms of art style. Pretty much the same improvements we have done to the minimap.
It's Code 1 and better, to be honest.
Territory lines that will no longer be at a low quality. We have made them very, very high quality, actually. We have cleaned up the visuals element of the tactical map because we recognized that there were too many elements going on, and we wanted to make sure that the players could always use this feature to read the action.
Absolutely.
So we did a couple of changes there. First thing, we removed all the squads, debuffs and buffs decorators on the unit shields because they were creating a bit of confusion.
Thank you.
We removed the neutral health bars on wrecks that would appear on the tactical map for vehicles that were destroyed. We fixed the unit's visual priorities. So when you play a match, this actually applies not only to replays, this applies also to the gameplay itself. When you are playing the game, your units will always have the highest priority, the highest visual priorities. So this means that if two units are next to each other, your unit's shields will always look on top of the enemy ones.
Okay, awesome.
Then we will
That was a big
prioritize
problem.
enemy units, then allies, and then neutral units. This should really help improving the readability of the feature, as we do recognize that the most important aspect is that you are able to see your unit's health and retreat them if they're in danger.
Right, and being able to quickly interact with them when you need to.
Exactly. Speaking of interaction, we actually improved some of the issues with the selection of the units. So I do remember that we had an issue where, like, trying to select the units, you would be able to select units even if they were outside of the selection box. We have fixed that. We've also fixed when you double click on units in garrisons. If you double click on them, the tactical map would close. And so, I mean, overall, all these features should really help with as quality of life improvements to make the feature like easier to use and more user friendly, pretty much.
Yeah.
Absolutely, man. I couldn't be more excited for this. And if they keep building upon this model, I think it's going to be just an incredible experience. As a TAC map user, I love using the tactical map just for the added multitasking and perspective that it gives you. But having this level of detail, I mean, you could identify the larger roads from the small roads. You can identify the exact positioning of the buildings and, the actual, proportions of the building itself. Your unit icons are in good, proportion to the terrain, and it's, the map is enlarged, so you can really see the detail required of the resource points and the specific choke points. I mean, I could go on and on about this, but it is so exciting to be able to have this from a visual experience and a gameplay experience. Great work from Relic. For me, it's the most exciting thing. It's what I use a lot, and I just couldn't be more happy about it because it also feels like an aerial photograph of the battlefield as well, right? It looks very much like that. So it's really cool to have that theme and feel overall. But let's continue.
One thing we've been seeing, but we haven't commented on it yet, is the event queues. What have we done there?
Right. So with event queues, we have finally been able to fix a long-lasting bug that prevented us to display only 3 of them. Before we had cases of like 5, 6, 7, and like even more event queues displayed. We'll now be able to only show 3 of them. And we've also updated their
just
visual
casually
style
phasing
so that
through
they
the
will
artillery
look more
piece.
cohesive
That's
with the rest of the
awesome.
front-end update.
Okay, good to know. So is that everything for the tactical map and the mini map, or is there anything else that you wanted to cover off there?
I think it's pretty much that's pretty much it. Yes.
It's the best mini map and TAC map in the franchise.
Let's circle back to the replay.
It looks so good.
I think you've shown off all of the features coming with this, but let's maybe talk about some of the other.
Let's look at the detail in the mini map, man.
Like, how do I generate one?
Fantastic.
Where can I save it? Once I've completed a match, how does that all work?
Yeah. So it is actually something that we can showcase here directly, but the user experience is that whenever you quit a match and you enter the post-match stats, you would be able to save the replay or even watch it directly in-game.
Okay.
If you try to save the replay, the game will offer you a name with a simple timestamp, but you would be able to change it to whatever you want, like High Relic Fans. And we would be able to save another replay. Or if you would just want to watch it directly, we can just do that.
Okay. That's
awesome.
That's good to know.
I like that you could load it up right after the match like that.
So, Marco, I think that kind of summarizes everything that we wanted to showcase here with replays and the tactical map and the mini map. Do you have any sort of final thoughts before we wrap up this segment?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just wanted to briefly mention that the team has really put its heart into replays from every discipline like UX, UI, gameplay, programming, tech art. We all worked as one and gave our best to keep the promise of delivering one of the best replays features that Relic has ever made. We really hope that you guys will enjoy this feature and that you will start sharing your favorite games out there on community websites or on forums, on Discord. We are also definitely ears open to feedback on how to make the feature even more amazing. Just like definitely share with us if there is anything that you feel is missing or feels off, from hotkeys to available information. We are definitely listening to that. And that's it. That's pretty much it for me.
Awesome. Well, I think this is a good place where I can throw in a quick plug for our official Discord, because we do have a channel there, Marco, where people can I think it's Co3 replays, where you can drop your replay file and it'll automatically spit out a bunch of stats about the match that you just played, and it'll allow other players to download it and watch it back themselves.
That's a really cool feature.
Once the replays go live.
Share
so
and
thanks so
interact
much,
with the
Marco. I know
community.
this was a lot of work to get this feature ready. So a huge thank you to everyone and on the team and to yourself for walking us through it. And I think we'll move to the next segment. Thanks so much, Marco.
Thank you very much. Bye, guys.
All right, guys, that's going to wrap up this 3-hour deep dive. That was a long video. I skipped over the campaign content, so if you're interested in seeing that, I'll leave a link to this video in the description below. You can go ahead and check that out. But I couldn't be more excited for this update. I'm really pumped that we're getting this on Tuesday. That's just 5 days away. And it really reminds me of the first time that I ever discovered the Company of Heroes franchise. I was about 11 years old at a mall, and I was walking into a GameStop. I was already a fan of strategy games, games like Army Men RTS, real-time strategy, games like StarCraft, Brood War. I was already starting to play at it on a casual level, but I remember looking up on the shelf and seeing the Company of Heroes game box. As many of you guys remember the original game box, and it had that flap that you can open up. I remember opening it up and just looking at the different pictures, the different images of the unit models and the environment, the destructible environment, the tank that they had on there, and just being like in awe as an 11-year-old, like as a strategy game fan, albeit a relatively newbie and young gamer. I felt like something about this game was different, and I remember bringing it up to the clerk at the front, and he basically told me that you shouldn't be playing this game because you're too young. It's too complicated. It requires a very strong computer. But he said it's a great game. It's one of the highest rated strategy games. He went on this whole rant about it, but said you're too young. So I never got the game. That was my first experience, was looking at that game box and being in awe. It wasn't until a few years later that I picked it up. I was older. I was about 14 years old, and I started playing it for the first time, and I was immediately hooked. I loved the game, and of course went on to play Co 2, and now we are here with Co 3. And I know it's been a struggle for the past 6, 7, 8 months since launch. It was a very shaky launch, but to see the amount of work that Relic has put into this update, for them to go back and rework every file, for them to address almost every single little problem that I had with the game, and many of you guys had with the game, is inspiring. It really shows you the heart of this team. We got to see several team members at Relic, and I really appreciate all of them, because they're really helping to turn this game into the greatest game in the franchise. My only hope is that this game takes off in a manner that it should. I think that Co 3 is going to be the best game of the franchise. I just really hope that it can gain that momentum that it deserves. I know it had a shaky start. I know it didn't deserve it in the beginning, but I really feel like this update is what we've been looking for. And I couldn't be more grateful, because I do love the game and I want to see it succeed. I want to see the community grow. And it's definitely a time to support Relic as much as we can, and to really help build this community and bridge the gap between the Co 2 community and guys from Co 1. Although I feel like hardcore Co 1 players will enjoy Co 3 more than the Co 2 fans, right? I feel like Co 1 and Co 3 are very similar in a lot of ways. And one of those ways is visually. From the overall aesthetic to the attack map, you're really starting to see the best of Co 1 come true in Co 3. So just super excited, guys. And I can't wait to be creating content for this new era in the game. It's just very exciting to have the replay mode, to have the new maps being introduced, the overall feel of the game and the immersion, the audio, the graphics, the new battle groups, and the shake up to the meta with more balance changes coming very soon. I think the game is going to change in a big way with the 2 new battle groups, and I think there's going to be a lot more balance changes than people may think, more fundamentals changes. And speaking of the battle groups, just in conclusion here, These battle groups are very dynamic. They're very complex, more so than the current ones in the game. So there's a lot of content there. And I think in 2024, we're going to be getting more content in a cyclical fashion. I think Relic will start rolling out content in 2024. Like I said in the previous coverage, I think 2024 is going to be the year of content. This year has been marked by polish, and we're seeing it in this update, really the epitome of polish in game design. You don't see this level of polish and rework in very many games at all. Many game studios just move on to the next game. And I just couldn't be more grateful for the team at Relic and for the community of you guys who've been with this game from the very beginning, supporting it. I think it's a very bright future ahead. So go ahead and let me know your opinions and thoughts overall. I would love to hear your feedback. If you did enjoy this, go ahead and smash the like button, subscribe, leave a comment. It really does help support the channel. And I'll see you guys on the next one.